Took it away from Green, down the floor to Mitchell, drive, scores, foul!
Harden at the top, looking for his first 30-point game as a Clipper. Dribbling with the right hand, sizing up heel, crosses over, feeling good. Dancing, step back, left wing, a three! 9-1! James Harden cannot miss!
102-98. Bulls lead the Sixers. A minute 37 to go. White head of the key. Bounce pass, Pucci. Right side three on the way. He got it again!
Two tight ends in the backfield. The handoff goes to Walker. He looks for running room. Bounces it off the right side. Inside the 20, the 15, the 10, the 5. Touchdown! Seahawks!
Good morning and welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers is back in town.
What's up, man?
How are you, buddy?
GBDR. That's what today is, Shane. GBDR. Hashtag GBDR.
Go big Dylan Raiola.
Yep,
there we go. The long wait, the unusual courtship appears to be over.
The long wait. Didn't we find out last week that he was interested?
I mean,
no.
To be fair, last week was kind of the final push, right?
Mm-hmm.
This has been something legitimately Nebraska fans have been talking about for a couple years. Because remember, the infamous Margarita story with Scott Frost was about yeah, you should have spent less time in Margaritaville. This was a story about Dylan Raiola. This was like a year and a half ago, and he was already well on the radar of Nebraska fans at that point. This has been a years-long saga.
Right.
But I think it's good.
He was pulled out of the heart, right?
Yes.
I mean, he was placed in Georgia. He was placed at Ohio State. Like, so when I say it was short-lived and not long-lived, it was because he was at a different school, right?
Yes.
He was verbally committed to another school. Did he actually put pen to paper at those schools?
He did not. No.
It was all verbal?
Yeah, those are all verbal commitments until tomorrow, in which I'm going to make sure I see the name on the paper just to make sure. But he will sign with Nebraska tomorrow. He put out his commitment yesterday, reported initially by ESPN, and then he put out his own stuff on social media. But it is true. This is not a prank. It's not April Fool's Day. Dylan Raiola has committed to
a 5-star quarterback has committed to your university,
the top quarterback prospect in the country. Like, just let that sink in for a minute. The best quarterback in the country has chosen to play his college football at the University of Nebraska.
No problem at all. Go Big Red.
That is no little thing.
Think about what a moment like this does nationally.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, look at ESPN's front page. Nebraska is the third story.
But I'm thinking more in the stance of what this means for other top prospects and other 5-stars out there. Because before Dylan Raiola committed to Nebraska, it was if you wanted to have a chance at winning a national championship or going to the NFL, you had to go to a school like Georgia. You had to go to a school like Alabama or Ohio State or LSU or a premier school that spit out college football players to the next level like it was their job to do. But because Dylan Raiola committed to Nebraska, his chances of going to the NFL don't dwindle. It may put a little bit more pressure on him to perform and be effective because he isn't at a school that can, let's just say,
it's a more challenging situation.
Mistakes.
Yeah, it's a more challenging situation
because of the challenge of that situation. But how refreshing, like a breath of fresh air to see a guy. And look, we're talking about it and reacting because it happened to Nebraska. But even if this was like a kid that was in Arizona and decided, hey, I'm going to go play at Arizona. He's a 5-star quarterback. He's 1 or 2, whatever recruiting list you look at in the country. And he ends up at Arizona. Why? Because that's just home to him. Nebraska is home to Dylan Raiola. Whenever he posted about Georgia, whenever he posted about Ohio State, did he ever use the term home? But when he posts about Nebraska, what does he post?
Home.
Home. And you gravitate where? to home.
Mm-hmm.
You gravitate to where you're comfortable and where you feel like this is where your family is.
Yeah.
And so other recruits out there in the class of 2025, 2026, they're going to look at what Dylan Raiola did and think, maybe I can stay home too. Maybe I don't have to go to Georgia in order to be the best college football player out there. Maybe if I'm from South Carolina, I can stay in South Carolina and be a 5-star quarterback at the University of South Carolina and be fine. Is South Carolina a powerhouse?
No.
God, no. But the snowball effect of a commitment like this just shows the rest of the country that, hey, there can be some parity done.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing that I think goes into this kind of conversation is the fact that you've got an expanded playoff next year as well. Like, that is kind of the underlying factor here is if you want to go play for a national championship, you now have an opportunity to do that at other places, because it's not just, hey, if I don't go to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, I'm never going to have a chance to win a national title because the field is opening up, right? You've got the opportunity to create, and not that this is Nebraska, because Nebraska's history is much more storied than a lot of these places, but you have the opportunity with an expanded playoff to create some Gonzagas of the world, if you will, that you get in college basketball, where Gonzaga started off as a developmental program. Gonzaga started off as, okay, we're going to develop some under the radar prospects. And then you've got, hey, we got some guys transferring in that maybe didn't work out at their other places. And then all of a sudden you have them getting recruiting wins with guys like Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren. You have them getting the 5-star guys. You have them getting the top of the class. And whether it's Nebraska or other teams throughout the country, you have an opportunity, more of an opportunity to do that now than you ever had in the past in college football. Because let's be honest, in the 14 playoff, if you weren't, I mean, look, Florida State is a blue blood and they went undefeated and they still got left out, right? So what hope did a UCF have? What hope did a Boise State back in the day have? Like, what hope did these teams have? And now, listen, those teams are probably still getting left out of a 12-team playoff. Although a few years ago, UCF would have made a 12-team playoff. Back in the day, Boise State for sure would have made a 12-team playoff. There's other opportunities for teams that just haven't existed before. So I do think you're going to see, and obviously Raiola's situation is different because of his ties to Nebraska. But I do see a situation where high-end guys can look at the landscape and say, hey, I'm still going to have an opportunity to win a national championship here. If I can get Nebraska to 10 wins, we're in the playoff, right? Like, that's not crazy. And you look at the schedule next year, and I'm not expecting college football playoff next year. Like, let me just say that first and foremost. But if you get a schedule like next year's Nebraska schedule, okay, you get to 7-0 relatively reasonably. So you have to win 3 out of your last 5 games. Like, that's what you're talking about. That's the difference between you and the college football playoff, is winning 3 out of 5 down the stretch with a USC team that you're like, I don't know what they're going to be next year. No Caleb Williams. UCLA team that's in transition that almost fired their head coach. You've got a Wisconsin team that hasn't figured their stuff out yet. You have an Iowa team replacing their offensive coordinator, and you're always in it with Iowa anyway. And there's another team in there that I think Ohio State is the other team in that stretch of the last 5. So it's like, yeah, we'd probably drop Ohio State, right? I can win 3 out of those other 4. And that's all you're talking. That's the difference between Nebraska and a college football playoff, whether it's next year or in following years. All of a sudden, that door from just like a tiny sliver of a door being open of like, well, maybe someday Nebraska could be nationally relevant again. They just kicked that thing wide open.
It's at least halfway open.
Yeah, they just kicked down that door, because not only do you have the opportunity with the 12-team playoff, you also have the guy that can kick the door down in Dylan Raiola. Like, I talked about this yesterday with Avery. We did a special edition last night. I need people to appreciate how much of difference makers these level of guys, quarterbacks, are in their classes. Like, we're talking Trevor Lawrence. We're talking Justin Fields. We're talking Bryce Young. We're talking Tua Tagovailoa. We're talking Quinn Ewers. We're talking Jaden Daniels. We're talking Caleb Williams.
Are these guys good at football?
You're talking Heisman's, national titles and college football playoff appearances and first-round picks. That's the level of guy Nebraska just got. Now, there's no guarantee he pans out, but that's the track record of those guys, right? So it's not an exaggeration to say, hey, he elevates your program.
That's how he profiles.
Yes, he profiles based on where he's ranked, where he's been evaluated, and those are recent history guys. I'm not going all the way back 20 years when the rankings were like a little more sus.
Keep it fresh.
Yeah, those are the last 5 years of guys that have more than 1 year of starting. That was the cutoff I made. So it's 2017 to 2021 classes. All of those guys have started for more than 1 year, and that's what he profiles to. That's the kind of guy we're talking about here. So if you're sitting there thinking, why are they talking about this high school kid for a week straight? Why are they talking about him elevating Nebraska's program? Because that's what it is. Historically, when you land one of these guys, that's what the opportunity is for you. Now, you still have to do everything else right. You still have to get it right. But judging by what we've seen of Matt Rule, do you have any doubt that he's going to get it right? Because I don't. I feel incredible about this. Like, not just because of Dylan Raiola. I'll be honest with you. If, like, year 3 and beyond Scott Frost had landed Dylan Raiola, I'd have been excited, but I'd have been pretty scared.
So
I got to have been really hesitant. I would have. I'm not today.
It's funny because I saw this tweet. Yesterday, and it made me laugh because everything that you're kind of saying about him being a legitimate game changer for this university, a difference maker. You know, he profiles as a potential first-round pick, Heisman, you know, go all the way down the list. These 5-star guys that come to universities tend to pan out like so. And I read this yesterday, and it made me laugh because you see so many people, whether they're fans of Georgia or writers down for the Bulldogs, talking about Dylan Raiola as if he's essentially nothing anymore. And, you know, he goes to Nebraska and it's just, he's killing his career, this, that, and the other. And it's just funny how, you know, when a guy like of his stature commits to your university, he is what does Ravi like to call it? A generational talent, right? But then when he decommits to go somewhere else,
total trash.
He's unproven.
Total trash.
He's an unproven freshman.
We've got a different Elite 11 quarterback. We don't need him. That's what Georgia's saying right now.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
When Dylan Raiola did not commit to Nebraska and went to Georgia instead of people saying like, oh, Dylan Raiola, he's garbage, this, that, and the other, it was, man, that was like really fun for a hot sec. But God.
And that was,
golly, how do we get there? How do we get the 5-star?
Yeah.
That was the thought process.
Yeah.
It wasn't, oh my gosh, he's going down to Georgia. He'll never amount to anything.
No, the thought process was, I wish he had come along in year 2 of 3 of Rule when we'd already established some sort of track record and proof of concept, so we felt more comfortable coming here. That was the thought. The only other thought, which again, I feel like I've talked enough about, but is totally asinine, is, oh, well, this kid must be a drama king and whatever. And, oh, look at all these different schools he's gone to and all this nonsense of it. It's like, oh, he must be demanding this and demanding that. And Nebraska said, no, thank you. And first of all, with the way it played out with Nebraska, I know that's not what happened. I mean, I can tell you he didn't demand a starting job. He didn't demand anything except a fair and open competition. From everything that I've heard, that's all he asked for, in addition to whatever the NIL stuff, right? Like, that's part of the equation. But he asked for a fair and open opportunity for a chance to play next year. And the coaching staff's like, yeah, absolutely. We give that to everybody. Like, that was the only thing that he asked for. Okay. So,
well, and in the current quarterback room.
Yeah, sure.
Are you looking at this and saying, man,
but when
there's no way I'm seeing the field next year.
But when Kyle McCord moved on from Nebraska, people were like, oh, Raiola must have demanded the starting job, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, Raiola walked into a situation and asked for the same thing McCord did, which was a fair and open competition. McCord walked into a room that looked like Harburg and Chuba, and that's it. And he's like, yeah, I can win that job. And then Raiola walks into the room and he goes, yeah, maybe I can't win that job. And that's why McCord moved on. Not because Raiola demanded anything, except for the same thing that everybody else gets, which is a fair and open shot. So, like, the narratives change around him sometimes, but around Nebraska, it was never, oh, this kid isn't any good. We tried to talk ourselves into the fact that maybe he wasn't a good fit, despite the fact that he's prodigiously talented.
We tried to talk ourselves into every scenario.
Because you're trying to make yourself feel better. You're trying to make yourself feel better, right? Because you're like, God, he was a legacy kid and we can't even land that guy. Like, that is what Nebraska fans were going through. And first of all, it's not the case. I feel like I've talked about that plenty. But secondly, just finally land. And honestly, I think it's more of a vote of confidence for Rule than anything that we could have seen on the field this year. Because we did see a lot of improvement, right? We saw improvement with the offensive line. We saw incredible defense. We saw them fighting, and they improved in a lot of different areas over the course of the season, right? The one area they couldn't improve was quarterback, which is a pretty easy pitch to a guy that's a 5-star and be like, hey, if you just come in and be better than what we had, like, look at what we can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think him putting his faith in Matt Rule is a huge vote of confidence and tells the rest of us that, okay, what we're actually thinking we're seeing is what's out there. Because you don't get a 5-star to commit to you, a 5-star that could have gone literally anywhere in the country he wanted to go, unless you're doing something right. Like, I genuinely believe that.
And when you win at Nebraska, it's different than winning at Georgia. Because
it's
when you win at Georgia,
anywhere, I promise you that.
Well, when you win at Georgia, it's taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation is to win 12 games,
especially now. Yeah.
And, if you don't win 12 games a year, that will be talked about. But if you do win 12 games a year, it's like, oh, well, that was expected. You should have won 12 games. But at Nebraska, you win 7 games, 8 games, 10 games, 12 games. No matter how many games you win, if it results in a bowl game by season's end, that's what's going to be talked about.
To start, for sure, yeah.
When Scott Frost got here, it was, man, if Scott Frost wins, if he takes Nebraska back to where they used to be, he'll never have to buy a beer again, right? When Matt Rule arrived, same type of conversation was said. Now, when Dylan Raiola arrives and he turns 21 someday, it's going to be, man, if he wins, he'll never have to buy a beer again. This city will put a statue up for that man.
Not only will he not have to buy a beer again, he may never have to work for it. Like, work. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, this, I don't know that people appreciate the magnitude of how big it would be if and when Nebraska comes back up. Because there is, first of all, if it happens, Dylan's probably an NFL quarterback, right? Like, I don't think that's a stretch based on what his talent profile looks like, right? And he's a prototypical, this isn't, like in the 90s, no matter how good Nebraska's quarterbacks were, it was a tough transition to the NFL because of the offensive style, right? That's not what we're talking about here with Dylan Raiola. You can have, if you're a 5-star guy in Dylan Raiola's skill set, like, you're gonna have a real good shot at the NFL. So not only do you have that set up for you, but literally you will have every opportunity. If you just want to stay in Nebraska forever, you will have whatever opportunities you want to come your way, whether it's like endorsements. You can own car dealers, whatever you want to do. If you're Dylan Raiola, you can just sit back and watch the money roll in if you're the guy that brings this place back, because that's how important it is here. And, I've talked in our work group chat before, because I'm one of the elder people in that group chat, because everybody else that works here, but
you can call it how it is. You're the second oldest.
Well, the third, I think. Sauter's older than me too.
Oh, that's right. Sauter is in that chat. He mutes it so much that I just don't remember that.
He doesn't really participate. But it's basically me, Sauter, and Sasha, right? Like, those are the ones that are not 25 years old or under. And so I was like, guys, I'm
26. Thank you.
I'm sorry, 26 years and under. I was like, I don't think you guys understand. And I was a kid, so I barely understand how freaking cool it is around here when Nebraska's popping off. Like, anybody under my age, I'm 36. So anybody younger than 36, I was 7, 8, and 10 years old when Nebraska was going through their run. Anybody younger than that, I know that you don't understand how great and that's not your fault, right? But it is so unbelievably cool around here. Even in 2009, when they had that run with Sue, even the first 7 games of 2016, where they go 7-0 under Mike Riley, and people are like, man, I don't know if this team's that good, but this is a lot of fun. If you sustain that over even a couple years, Nebraska becomes an incredible place. I wasn't doing this job, obviously, because I was a kid. But, man, this job becomes so much more fun. Just being in the state of Nebraska becomes so much more fun. Like, this is a better place to live when Nebraska is good at football. I swear to God. Like, it just is. And I like living here anyway. But if this thing starts popping off the way we think it will, I cannot express to you how cool it is to live in Nebraska.
And, the question I think people should really be asking themselves is, what's the one and only individual position that can turn around a program?
It's quarterback.
It's the quarterback.
It's the only spot.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? On the football field. Anywhere. You could have
potentially
the number one
sport.
wide receiver in football, but he doesn't turn around a program because he's not the one dictating how he's getting the football. Like, he may get open, but the ball's still got to get there.
I think the only position in any sport that dramatically changes your chances of winning. Like, I think it's the only one.
Maybe starting pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, look at like the numbers on like a Nolan Ryan, where he had, I want to say there's a number, it's like 198 quality starts
you're right.
that he was a non-winner in.
You're right, but you rely on the offense to put up some runs for you. Yep,
and
you're right.
Listen, I get that as a quarter.
You could have zeros on the board for you, but unless you have some runs on your end. No, you're right. That's a good point.
And listen, it's starting pitcher's probably close to next, right? I always go to like goalie and hockey. They have an enormous outcome of the game. Obviously, they can't score, but
they're kind of like a starting pitcher,
right? Yeah, but it's those are probably in that next tier. But man, a quarterback because not only do you score as a quarterback, obviously, but you can control the entire tempo of the game, and if you can consistently keep the ball away from the other team, you're sort of playing defense too, right? And it is like probably the closest thing is a superstar in basketball that raises your floor. Like LeBron in the early Cavs years raised their floor from god awful to playoff team. Right? Like the roster around him was not a playoff team ever.
And a lot of those rosters weren't NBA championship teams.
For sure, right? So that's the only thing that's close is if you've got one of those true super duper stars in basketball.
Super duper. I love it.
Yeah. Well, because LeBron, like peak LeBron's in a different level. Like, there's superstars.
He's in a different category.
And then there's peak LeBron, right? You've got like peak LeBron, peak Jordan.
So are you looking at Dylan Raiola as LeBron James in this instance of how you take we'll call him a mediocre football program to playoff team?
I think that's the upside here. Yeah, I do. I mean, I wanted to push back on it because it sounds ridiculous out loud. But I think that's the upside here is you take a football team. I mean, I think the ceiling on this is like a 2019 LSU.
Ravi said it. Dylan Raiola is LeBron James.
National champion. Let's go, baby. Coming up next, we will set up the show and let you know what else we got going on here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here at 7:30. I'm Ravi Lulla. If you're watching with me, we're live from the Hurrdat Sports Radio. The ESPN Tri-City. We are live on YouTube and Facebook. Appreciate all of our friends chiming in on the YouTube chat already.
Yeah, I was trying to catch up, and I'm like, wow,
I am
loving.
Yeah, it's been
all the different names I'm seeing.
I know. We got a lot of new faces. We appreciate everybody chiming in there. I got a DM on Twitter. Somebody wanted to ask me.
Just you. Okay, I'll stay silent.
Well, you can chime in as well.
Well, they did DM you.
They did, but we can talk about it on the show. He says, what about the missed opportunity to bring in other talented guys if Raiola had committed earlier? A lot of guys that were interested but backed off once Raiola committed to Georgia. And that's a totally fair point. There probably would have been some additional opportunities for peer recruiting and things like that if Raiola had committed earlier. I don't necessarily. So there is a missed opportunity there. I'm not going to try and.
I don't know how much it actually hinders.
You're probably talking about a couple guys at most.
The window,
to be fair. But I also think here's what you're looking at. Okay. Especially if in year one, Raiola plays well and Nebraska looks good. Let's get crazy here, okay? Because I'm in that kind of mood this morning. Let's say Nebraska wins 9 games next year, okay? Not a crazy number, but a really good number. That'd be obviously a huge improvement with the way the schedule looks out from what we know right now. I know it's always dangerous and stupid to play like schedule look-ahead games, but it's, December 19th, we're going to do it. I think 9 wins is reasonable and on the table. It would be a really, really good year, but I don't think it's out of the question. Let's say Nebraska wins 9 games with Dylan Raiola as a true freshman. What do you think the transfer portal looks like for Nebraska that year, right? You're going to have whatever wide receivers are going to want to come play with Dylan Raiola.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a ton of guys. So did it hurt this year's high school recruiting class? Absolutely. You're probably talking about 2 or 3 guys tops, so I don't think it's a ton, but they'd be high-end guys. I'm not trying to walk around that. But even with that missed opportunity, I still think there's going to be a ton of chances, whether it's in the spring transfer portal, whether it is next recruiting cycle, the 2025 recruiting cycle, which, by the way, I think is going to be a bonkers class for Nebraska. Like, I think that thing is going to be insane. And next year's transfer portal in this time period, you've still got 3 huge opportunities between now and Dylan Raiola's sophomore year at Nebraska to really put together some impressive classes. I think Nebraska's already started to go to work on the offensive line. I know a lot of people chiming in about the offensive line, and I'm curious where your head is, because first of all, from improvements from year 1 or year 0 to year 1
mm-hmm.
with Donovan Raiola, with Matt Rule, with largely the same guys in the room that we wanted to run out of town under the previous regime, they got dramatically better.
And now people are low-key excited that Bryce Benhart is coming back for another year.
I'm not just low-key, I'm thrilled. He was the most consistent and best offensive lineman for Nebraska this year, and I could not stand to see him on the field 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real thing, okay? And you've got a guy that everybody I know that knows about football is obsessed with in Sam Sledge, coming off of a redshirt year. People are obsessed with this dude. And
it's like I brought up last week. I will be okay to say, like, yes. I think it was a question I asked BC actually when I was wondering with the extension of Raiola, was it too early to give it to him just based on the 1 year of success, or would he have liked to see it come after we see the development of some of those young guys in the room, like Sledge and Gatula? And if I remember correctly, he pointed out that it came at the right time, but it is something I still think about with those young recruits of once I see them develop, then I'll know for certain that Donovan Raiola is the guy.
For sure.
Like, for certain. Now, should you pay him ahead of time? Yeah. Based on the improvements that you saw last year? Sure.
Absolutely deserved. Yeah.
But with the improvements we saw, as you pointed out, from year 0 to year 1 of Coach Rule, it's night and day. It's not even close. The protection that these quarterbacks got this year, even though it wasn't, we'll call it amazing, but it was much better than what you saw in the last year of Scott Frost, than the first year of Coach Rule. That right there is deserving of, the price tag that Donovan Raiola got. And look, we talk about it a lot. The raise didn't come because of Dylan Raiola. So that's why we are focusing on the O-line growth in terms of the raise than we are the recruitment of Dylan Raiola. But I'm sure it helped. Like, I'm sure seeing that, hey, my uncle's locked up for the long term, maybe I'll come and be the next great thing at the university, because I'll be working directly with my uncle who is protecting me, who's making sure that I'm going to perform to the best of my ability, because that's his job, is to get these old linemen to give me time to throw.
Well, and again, the two things can be connected without being connected, right? And what that means is I don't think Donovan Raiola got paid in order to get Dylan Raiola here. I do think Donovan Raiola getting paid had an impact on how Dylan Raiola and Dominic Raiola felt about Nebraska, the coaching staff, and the way they take care of people who perform well, and the way they keep their word to people who perform well. And now they kind of are who they say they are, right? Matt Rule, the whole time, was like, listen, I kept Donovan Raiola because I like Donovan Raiola. I think he's a good football coach, and I think he's going to do a good job with this offensive line, regardless of what that meant for Dylan Raiola. This is going back a year from when Donovan was retained. And the ability for Matt Rule to put his money where his mouth was, like the ship had sailed on Dylan Raiola, everybody thought, and Donovan still got the extension because he deserved it. It wasn't because they thought it was some last chance Hail Mary for Dylan. It was, hey, Donovan did a great job this year. He took this offensive line from putrid to above average in 1 year with the same dudes, with 2 full-time starters missing and Newilly missing a chunk of the year as well. He played some of this year with only 40% of his starting offensive linemen, and still they dramatically improved.
Feels like the offense played with 40% of themselves.
I mean, they played with like 40% of a quarterback most of the year, which was a big problem as well. But that was the other thing that I wanted to bring up. When you've got a guy at quarterback who actually has good pocket presence, which I think is low-key one of Dylan Raiola's best traits, is he has a really good feel in the pocket.
Yeah, he's got good awareness.
Your offensive line all of a sudden looks so much better. And that's part of what we saw last year. Some of the deficiencies that we thought were on the offensive line, I genuinely think were quarterback issues. And not to put everything on the quarterbacks, but let's be honest, it's not like that was a great position for Nebraska last year. A lot of the issues with offensive line come down to a quarterback not knowing where to go, or feeling phantom pressure, or not being able to climb a pocket, right? Like, you're supposed to force guys to the outside, and if guys are trying to bail to the outside, all of a sudden they get a sack, and it looks like the offensive line did a terrible job. Well, they're creating the pocket, right? So guys are going to get forced to the outside. You have to be able to climb up that pocket to deliver a throw. Nebraska's quarterbacks really struggled with that this year. And so it made the offensive line not look as good as I thought they were performing. When you've got a guy like Dylan Raiola who knows how to do that, who's got a really good pocket presence, all of a sudden you can make an above average offensive line look even better. And frankly, I think they're going to be better than above average next year anyway.
Now, going back to your initial question to wrap up the segment, the Dylan Raiola commitment is a little late in terms of what Nebraska could have had, right?
For helping out the class.
In terms of 5-star commitments. What they have in the room right now, I don't think is all that bad for DR's first year.
No,
what we saw out of Jalen Lloyd, even though he's a 3-star, Jalen Lloyd offers so much athletic ability and speed on the outside. I mean, shoot, at one point, I think Texas Tech had him for track and football. Does Nebraska have him for track too, or did he just stick with football? I can't remember.
I don't know if he's running track, but he's a world-class track athlete.
Right.
I mean,
and then you look at Malachi Coleman, who's a 4-star, one of the best receivers to come out of the state. Mm-hmm. You have Thomas Fedoni, who was a former 5-star. He was number 1 tight end in the group. Was he he was a 4. He was a high 4. So a high 4, but he was the best tight end in his class.
Yeah, in the country.
You have dudes on this offense
Not
right
to mention, you've got another guy in that group with Carter Nelson that is the highest ranked tight end in this class. Now, he's got a little development to do, I think, still, but it's not like you have no guys there. And we didn't even mention the guy that the coaching staff thought was the furthest along in Jaden Doss. He's the guy that they thought was the best freshman receiver before he broke his hand. Mm-hmm. So you do have options. And don't forget, bunch of really, really athletic guys redshirted this year in that room as well. Not to say they won't get some more transfer wide receivers, but it's not like the room is bare.
And remember, a good quarterback can really elevate anybody's game.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio next.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. Want to remind you that coaches make substitutions during the game to get the best players on the field. Drivers should do the same. Getting behind the wheel after drinking demands a substitution. Get a sober driver behind the wheel. Impaired driving is deceptively dangerous. Message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We are wrapping up our first hour here. Lots of Dylan Raiola talk. Do want to remind you, we're going to talk to Nick Bahe here at 8 a.m. I'm sure he's got some thoughts on Dylan Raiola as well. Comes from a long line of Huskers in his family. We'll talk, obviously, some college basketball with our guy, Nicholas Allen, as well. And then at 9 o'clock, we're going to talk to Mike Schaefer. I'm sure he's been busy. We can ask if there's any more dominoes that he expects to fall between now and really about 24 hours from now with National Signing Day tomorrow. We will also get to Hurrdat Hot Seat to end the show. But right now, not lost because it hasn't officially happened yet. But there is some other quarterback news in Nebraska that I'm hearing some things about that I want to share and kind of get your thoughts on, Andrew. So obviously, there's been a few major quarterback developments in Nebraska over the last week. First, Kyle McCord looked like he was coming to Nebraska, not coming to Nebraska. Dylan Raiola looked like he was coming to Nebraska. He is coming to Nebraska. Daniel Kalen looked like he was leaving Nebraska. He's also staying at Nebraska, which I think is a big deal for their quarterback depth and development there as well. But there's another guy, name you might be familiar with, that I'm hearing some things about as well. A little guy named Casey Thompson.
I don't know how little he is.
Well, I mean, he's kind of small for a quarterback. He's a little short. He's like
Maybe
5'11", 6 foot. That's a little small for a quarterback.
Hey,
you know,
don't call out the 5'11s.
I mean, listen, he's taller than I am. I'm just saying for a quarterback, not prototypical.
Hey, what's Kyler Murray? 5'5"?
Maybe. He's running around there like NFL Tom Cruise out there.
NFL Tom Cruise. He does make things look impossible.
I mean, for the Cardinals, a little Mission Impossible.
Yeah, it's his mission.
The Casey Thompson, what I'm hearing is there is a potential for him to come back to be kind of a mentor backup quarterback to Dylan Raiola as he kind of starts his career path towards coaching. He wants to be a coach from everything that I've heard, and this he would kind of view as an on-ramp to his coaching career. He would be sort of a mentor for Dylan and for Danny Kalen as well, and for the whole quarterback room, because Casey is famously kind of a film junkie. He is adamant about his preparation, things like that. Kind of because he's been in college football forever. I mean, this is year 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what. It's deep.
Carry the 2.
He is deep into the he's deep into his college football career here, but he's got that professionalism that you talk about sometimes when you talk about like a rookie in the NFL. You want to let's have a veteran presence in there so he learns how to do the job. That's kind of the role Casey Thompson would be having in the quarterback room, and then he'd be kind of a break glass in case of emergency situation in terms of a backup quarterback. So that to me is actually a really interesting move for Nebraska. I think it's really smart too, because chances are Dylan Raiola is going to be the starter next year. I mean, he's coming in the spring semester. He's going to have spring football. He's going to have all summer, and he's going to have fall camp to win that job. I fully expect him to win that job. And he is a guy who's got the talent level where that's a reasonable expectation. It's going to be hard to find a veteran guy who wants to be in a position where he knows, like, hey, I'm not going to the NFL. Like, I'm not probably going to play very much, if at all, behind this guy. That's okay with that spot. And Casey Thompson kind of perfectly fits the mold of a guy that wants to be a coach, a guy that has a ton of experience in college football, and a guy that has familiarity with Nebraska, right? And I kind of wanted to, well, first, I want to get your thoughts on that situation. Good move for Nebraska, bad move for Nebraska, just a weird move for Nebraska. Like, when you hear Casey Thompson might be back, and I'm hearing they think he will be. That's obviously nothing official yet. How does that strike you?
The assumption that he's back is just so predictable of Coach Rule. I mean, we talk about him playing chess all the time against everybody else while they're playing checkers. Like, he is 10 moves ahead. Did anybody expect in any world that they were going to land Raiola after what had happened? No. Did anybody expect to hear even the name Casey Thompson in Nebraska just a week or two ago?
I did not.
No. But Coach Rule is just so far ahead, and he has this vision, and he's going to do whatever it takes to achieve what's in front of him. And I think adding Casey Thompson is a tremendous move. And for a lot of the points that you said, for one, he's essentially merging. And when I say he, as Coach Rule is essentially merging the idea of bringing in McCord with a veteran. Yeah. And that's just it, because they were going to bring McCord in. He was going to start a year. They were going to have Dylan probably ride the pine, maybe get some action in the 4 games, keep his red shirt, whatever. But in order to give Dylan the reps right away, bringing a guy like Casey Thompson into the room is kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You get the veteran, but you also get that quarterback coach that you're looking for. Yeah. And that's really what I think this move is all about. Do I think that Nebraska could still end up with a quarterback coach? Yeah. I also don't think it's necessary anymore because you can give Casey Thompson those duties. And if what we know about Casey is true, him being a film junkie, yes, but he is kind of like a nut job in the film room.
Yeah.
He is so much of a film junkie that he is probably more Coach Rule than he is player. And because of that, and because of his want and desire to be a coach someday, you kind of bridge that gap not only with the McCord idea, but the quarterback's coach idea by bringing in just one guy. And if he does indeed sign, whether it's a walk-on offer, whether it's an actual, I don't even know if they even have scholarships left.
I think it's a walk. I think it would
make sense to be a walk-on.
Maybe
offer.
some NIL, but yeah, walk-on.
I mean, how perfect is it to have a guy like Casey Thompson in the room? Yes, for one reason, because he's been at Nebraska before. 2, because he is so much of a coach already in the way he prepares for a game that he can be looked at as a quarterback's coach. And 3, you give Dylan Raiola the starting job right away and molding him throughout these next 7-8 months. Is Casey Thompson, a guy that has started so many games at the college football level. You got everything you wanted for a cheap price, but also for the right price because you found a way to kind of fill in your diagram. Like when you draw the 2 circles, remember that from grade school? You draw one circle, you draw another circle, you call it a Venn diagram. What's in the middle? Casey Thompson. He's right in the middle of both of those circles.
I do fully expect him to still hire a quarterback coach, but he does help in that room as well, obviously, as kind of a mentor. I expect movement maybe closer to the end of the NFL season on that quarterback coach room. Not that I have a name in mind or anything like that, but going to the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline, we've got Michigan Lance on the line. What's going on, Lance?
Hey, good morning, boys. How you doing?
What's up, man?
Man, you know, got to give a shout out to our guy, Coach Mickey Joseph, man.
Got a head coaching job.
Yeah, man, right on to him. Hey, Ravi, he bounced back like you, man. You guys are having a good 2023.
Appreciate it.
That's good stuff, man. Hey, the Raiola deal, man. You know, that's good stuff for you guys. Here's what I'm hoping happens. What I think should happen.
Okay.
Is the competition and whoever wins the job, just redshirt, stick with it, and continue to compete. Because there's some things from in the past that you can do that does still work, and that's competition. If you look back, let's take Nebraska for example. You know, it was Tommy Frazier, Tony Veland, Mike Grant, and I don't know if Behringer was in that quarterback room as well. At the time when all those guys were there, but I know it was Tony Veland and Frazier for sure. 2 young guys. You know, Tony Veland got hurt. Tommy emerged, and then, you know, he switched over to defense. But just like, you know, you look at the who else can I give you a little bit more? Even back in the day, like Miami, the U, they had Jim Kelly, Vinny Testaverde, Bernie Kosar. Like, competition in rooms, that stuff still works, and you can still excel and get to where you want to be, even though it may not happen right away. You know what I mean? But I understand we are in an impatient world now, and kids are like, hey, I'll just run over here so I can play real quick. But, man, competition and sticking it out, man, that still works too. You'll still get an opportunity. Joe Burrow, he stuck it out at Ohio State and then win his 1 year. Like, all right, I've been here 4 years and didn't work out, but hey, man, that made him a better quarterback though. And then when he got his shot for that 1 year, it worked out. So there's an even closer example to nowadays. So I hope they both stick it out and like I said, just compete, you know?
Lance, appreciate the call. Totally agree that competition is better for everyone involved. It is harder to foster that nowadays with the transfer portal, but Michigan Lance, we appreciate the call there. As we wrap up hour number 1, coming up next, we will talk to our guy, Nick Bahe. He is a college basketball analyst for Fox Sports. Also, big Nebraska fan. We'll see how he feels about the Dylan Raiola situation here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Got it right. Meet me at the rim.
I open up some salsa, explodes all over my chest.
I'm not sure what's better, the pass or
Old Dominion.
Man down.
Kicking off.
Can we talk about Old Dominion with Nick after what happened yesterday?
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Though that voice can only mean one thing. It's that Nick Bahe, college basketball analyst for FS1, host of the Nick Bahe podcast and the Chick and Nick show. is joining us here today with his Superfly Shoot 360 polo on. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Oh, Nick Bahe. I told Ravi anytime I get to talk to you, it's just like it's a true blessing. I mean, like you have the ability to make anybody smile. Like, I don't know if that's ever been told to you, but just like seeing you smile and hearing you laugh and just hearing your voice, I'm just like, man, like I'm in a good mood.
I appreciate that, Andrew. That's very kind of you to say. Listen, Bill Self used to say, listen, guys, you're either an energy giver or you're an energy taker. And I always try to make sure that, like, even now, like any room I walk into, I try to lift it up. I try, or at least I'll lift the volume up at the very least.
Wait, so Nick, did we just get some breaking news that Bill Self is an energy vampire guy like Sean Eichhorn? Is that what we just learned?
No, I got to see him on Friday. Don't go saying stupid stuff. I got to see him. I don't know if you guys feel like this, like even when you were growing up, like there are certain coaches, no matter how old you get, you like snap back into like, you're in charge of me, even though like I'm almost 40 and a grown man. Like I feel like Bill Self, Dana Altman, Jeff Smith, my high school coach, Chuck Mazursky, my high school football coach. Like even now when I see them, if they told me like, get on the line and run, I'd be like, yes, sir. Okay. Like I'll do whatever they tell me to do.
Like, sir, I'm wearing wingtips. They're like, I don't care. Get on the line.
I'm really out of shape, but here I go.
Well, Nick, before we get into college basketball, I know you're a huge Nebraska guy. I know you do all the Nebraska recaps on your podcast. What was your reaction, first of all, last Monday when things start trickling out? That's like, wait, Dylan Raiola might still be in play. Fast forward to yesterday where the commitment actually happens. Just what's your thought process that whole time? Like all I could hear in my head when I was thinking about what is Nick Bahe thinking about? I just hear like the scream, like the Marcus Foster just hit a 3 to win the game scream.
Well, that's pretty much what it was. I mean, it's weird. Like, so, about a year ago at this time, Rule retains Donovan Raiola. And you kind of go, okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. Rule has the Undertaker gif, and then Dylan Raiola, he decommits from Ohio State. And then obviously Nebraska and Dylan Raiola were hot and heavy with a bunch of visits for a while. And it felt like it was inevitable that it was going to end with Nebraska and Raiola being together. So on one hand, like the fact that it's ended this way is not surprising, but how we've arrived at this point is very surprising. For at the very last minute, something to go awry at Georgia, and all of a sudden he's back into the equation. I hope, and I don't know if we ever will, I hope we get like the full, real, uncut, raw story of just what happened over the course of the last 2 weeks between Dylan Raiola, Georgia, and Nebraska. Because like even clearly, like Nebraska was pursuing Kyle McCord, and I don't think the Dylan Raiola thing sat well with Kyle McCord, which tells you that everything was a little bit everybody was kind of flying by the seat of their pants a little bit with this thing. So I say all that to say I am beyond fired up. I think Nebraska football's program has needed an injection like this from a player standpoint. Scott Frost was kind of like the Dylan Raiola coach version of what we're seeing here. He was going to be the savior. There was a lot of excitement with Rule. It's been a while since there's been this kind of excitement with a player. And for me, I don't know. I'm not going to be one of those guys that shies away from like it needs to pop next year. Mm-hmm. Like with the way the schedule falls, especially I think 6 of the first 7 are at home or something like that, or 5 of the first 7, whatever it is. I know the first 4 are, and Tony White coming back, the defense coming back. It feels like this is a year that it's got to. I'm not saying they got to go 11 and whatever, win 11 games, but I'm expecting big things next season. I think Dylan Raiola is going to hit the ground running. Not saying he's going to win the Heisman or anything like that, but I'm fired up. This is going to be great.
Now,
it's
Nick,
exciting.
Ravi and I were talking during a break, and you saw the poem that got released when Raiola committed, and I'm like, man, we should probably like go on Cameo and see if we can find somebody like really popular to like read this poem passionately. Maybe have Shane put some epic music underneath it. Nick Bahe should be our guy.
That's true.
Right? Like, Nick, after this, I need you to do me a favor and go to
dramatic
Raviola's
reading.
Twitter page.
Voice it over.
Yeah, give me like an intro to a movie. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And I need that voiceover so we can play it on the show tomorrow.
Okay. I'll see what I can do for you.
That's your homework. Hey, speaking of like big players and big moments, are you going to be present for Doug McDermott's retiring on Wednesday?
I will be. I was going to do the game on TV, but there's kind of a rule in my world that when Bill Raftery becomes available, Nick Bahe's out. I'm out. So I was scheduled to do that game on FS1. Raft's schedule opened up. I mean, come on. Like, it's Bill Raftery. So Raft is doing the game. So I will just be there in attendance as a fan and a supporter and a guy that is in Doug McDermott that I can't believe. Now, Andrew, I don't know how much you got to pay attention to it when you would have been in St. Louis probably during his career, but it was
don't worry. We saw some great Craton moments on TV in St. Louis too.
Yeah, the further removed I get from it, the more I can't believe that. Like, I got to see every point the guy made. Like, I was the full-time radio analyst, and so all 3,000 points, I got to see all of them. And so I'm very, very excited. I could talk for forever about Doug.
Nick, I've been trying to kind of put into context, because I'll obviously be there tomorrow night as well, just how crazy his senior year was, right? Because obviously you get all this hype right away, and then it culminates with that senior night against Providence, where like he needed 38 to get to 3,000. And everybody was just like, yep, he's going to get it tonight. Like, 38 in a college game is bonkers. And no one had any doubt that he was going to get it. And then he goes out and gets 45. That, like, can you put into any kind of context for me how just stupid that is?
Yeah. I mean, the fact that and he says it after the fact, he's like, oh yeah, I was going for it. Like, imagine being like heading into a game being like, I'm going to get 38 tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to go get 40. No big deal.
That is what I'm doing. But that season, I mean, averaged 27 a game. Mm-hmm. He would have 25, and you were like, Doug was okay tonight.
Yeah.
Like, think about Nebraska's roster, Craton's roster, and if someone had 25, you'd be like, dog, that dude was on one tonight, you know? Yeah. Doug would have 25, and it was like, he was okay. It got to the point where it looked like varsity versus JV that year with him, where I used to love, he had a way of, some guys let the game come to him, or come to them. Like, he was notorious. That first 4 minutes was like a Tyson fight. Like, Doug was going to come out swinging. And the amount of times under that first 16-minute media timeout, Doug would have like 11 or 12 or whatever was all the time. And it was so interesting when he's going through the Big East. There was the whole question of, okay, he did it in the Valley. Can he do it in the Big East? And I've told this story before, but I remember being at Seton Hall. Creighton played Seton Hall pretty early in the conference slate. And there was some Jersey Seton Hall fan comes down and he sees that, me and Bishop are the radio guys. He taps me. He's like, hey, which one's McDermott? Which one's McDermott? I was like, he's right there. He's got the T-shirt on. And he gets this look on his face like, that's it? That's McDermott? And he kind of shrugged like, okay. And I was like, he's pretty good. You better watch out. And he had like 12 in the first 3 minutes of the game. And I knew we were sitting. And so at timeout, I turned to him and I kind of gave him a look like, he's pretty good, isn't he? And he kind of gave me that like Jersey, like, yeah, I'll give you that. He's pretty good. Still though, Robbie, like as much as his senior year was crazy, I think some of his great performances early on, like his sophomore and junior year, get forgotten. What he had, like
Bradley 42.
It was 44.
44. Yep.
That was the first moment for me where like I thought he went from like, I think Doug's really good to is this guy like the best player in the country? Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, like he had 44 points and I think he missed 4 shots. And like one of them, he got a rebound. He like missed a bunny. He got the rebound and laid it in. And another one was like a desperation heave 3 from like 35 feet. So he basically had 44 and didn't miss. And I remember the official at the end of that game walking down towards me. I think it was Kip Kissinger, and he took his whistle out of his mouth and he looked at me and his eyes got big and he just mouthed, "Wow." And I was like, yeah, this dude, he had Wichita State his junior year.
Night. He went like 13 for 17 for
he was incredible. It just got to the point, guys, where like if you didn't double team him, he was going to have 30.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. Say it with me. If you didn't double team him, he was going to have 30. It was incredible to watch, man. I hope people understand and appreciate what they got to see, and I hope they really reflect and give him the ovation and the love and admiration that he deserves tomorrow night.
We're talking with Nick Bahe. He's a college basketball analyst for FS1, also hosts the Nick Bahe podcast and the Chicken Nick Show here on Hurrdat. Nick, let's move to current day college basketball because I could literally just reminisce with you about Doug all day, and we should at some point just for funsies. But the current Craton Blue Jay team, they've had a couple weird losses. CSU, really good Colorado State team, still didn't look great, that loss. Then a UNLV team that I don't think is much more than average, and a really bad performance for Craton there. But then they come out, they stomp what I think is a pretty decent Nebraska team. They get a big win against Alabama. Like, what do you make of this team and some of the inconsistencies they've shown so far this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting team. You know, I think they kind of, their weaknesses are pretty prevalent to me. And I think they got a little bit of a quickness issue and an athleticism issue. And when you combine that with the fact that they're all such good 3-point shooters, you know, they have a tendency to really, really, really kind of live and die by the 3, which isn't necessarily like Villanova is a team that kind of lives and dies by the 3 too. So it's not necessarily something that is abnormal. But I think this team has a hard time getting easy baskets when the 3s aren't falling. That's where Kalkbrenner in particular, I thought that second half against Alabama, he went into paint mode. Like I'm posting, I'm rolling, I'm scoring at the rim, and nobody's scoring on the rim on the other end. And they need that Kalkbrenner, who has been that guy for a few years. They need him even more because of kind of what we're talking about. No Kaluma. Kaluma could kind of get some offensive rebounds or get to the basket. Nemhard was really good at getting in and finishing at the rim. Stephen Ashworth isn't blessed with being able to do that. And Trey Alexander is kind of a mid-range guy. So they just struggle to get easy baskets. And I think some of the inconsistencies lie in the fact that when you are a team that really relies on the 3 ball, you can be kind of boom or bust. And then I think in a weird way, Kalkbrenner and Alexander, in particular Alexander, have been a little inconsistent this year. And I say that with a ton of respect for Kalkbrenner, where like my expectation for him is to just like completely dominate, you know. But Trey Alexander has had some games where like Craton needs him to be the best guard on the floor, you know, like on both ends of the floor. And there's been a few games where that hasn't necessarily been the case. Isaiah Stevens outplayed him. And then, you know, against UNLV, you know, kind of take your pick. There was a handful of guys that outplayed him. So I think some of the inconsistencies lie in the fact that those 2 guys have been a little up and down for what they're relative to what they're capable of and what's needed of them. And then just the fact that they're really reliant on the 3 ball makes it a little bit, this team more reminds me of some of this team more reminds me of some of Greg McDermott's earlier Craton teams, whether it's the Doug teams or even some of the earlier teams, you know, that relied heavily on the 3, where it's like, listen, they're going to take 35, 43s. And if they're hitting them and you let them get clean looks, you're in trouble. And if they're not, they could be in trouble. So I still really like this team. I still really think Baylor Shireman has been just like Mr. Consistent throughout. But That's kind of what I'm seeing. I think they just got an athleticism and quickness issue on the perimeter, and they're going to have to be able to try to navigate that throughout the season.
Nick, you mentioned Kalk and Trey, two guys that were, looked at it at the NBA level in the offseason. And, you were wondering, are they going to return? Are they going to go? And they come back to Craton to maybe try to elevate their game in a way to improve their draft stock. You mentioned how it just kind of hasn't all been there yet for both of those guys this year. What are those necessary improvements you think need to be made in order to really hit that next level as prospects?
Yeah, and what's hard is I think and this is sometimes you run into this, where what is necessary to improve your draft stock doesn't necessarily jive with what's best for you and your college team. I have thought all along, I'm very lukewarm on Kalkbrenner shooting threes. Like, unless they're a end of the shot clock, you pick and pop, you're out on the perimeter, you step out for some sort of 5-out look and you're wide open and it's under 10 on the clock or whatever. I like that dude picking, rolling, posting up in the paint. Just think about it. Every time Kalkbrenner shoots a three, the other team is going, thank you. We'll take that. And it's not that he can't make them. I mean, he's proven he can make them. So I think, Andrew, the hard thing is like, I think what the NBA probably wants to see Kalkbrenner show he can do is they know he can protect the rim. I think they know that he can probably, slide his feet on a perimeter guy a little bit and at least contest and make something difficult. They know he's a great pick roll lob guy, which is what a lot of 5-men are in the NBA. But what they probably want to see is like, hey, can this dude maybe stretch the floor and pick and pop and shoot threes at the 5 spot? And so I feel like for him, it's those two things are a little at odds for me. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not saying never shoot threes, but I'm not a fan of like, here comes Ashworth, Kalkbrenner's the trailer, you flip it back to him, there's 20, like he's Rogge or, something like that, and he's letting that thing fly. I'm not a fan of that. So that's kind of the Kalkbrenner side of things. For Trey Alexander, I mean, I think he's shown signs. Like, I thought early in the year, it was like, man, that dude looks like an NBA combo guard. Mm-hmm. NBA combo guard. Like, I think the biggest thing for him is just, he's a good athlete. He's not a great athlete. I think he needs to continue to try to showcase that, hey, I'm athletically, I can hang, I can guard different guards. I can get by different guys off the bounce. I can manufacture and create shots for other guys. So I think Trey Alexander is going to get a lot of reps to be able to show those things. I thought Trey was well on his way to improving his stock early in the year. I think that's kind of slowed down, but there's so much basketball left, mm-hmm. and he's going to get the opportunity to take on some really Kolek and Tristan Newton and take your pick from a lot of different good guards down there. Justin Moore, as he progresses throughout this year.
Nick, let's go to the national kind of landscape in college basketball before we get you out of here. Obviously, your Kansas Jayhawks off to a good start. Purdue and Houston as well. As you've watched these top teams early on in the season, how do you think kind of the tiers break out? Do you think there are a couple of teams above everybody else, or because it kind of seems like there's a clump at the top that is sort of all in the same neighborhood to me? Do you agree with that, or how do you break it down?
Yeah, because I kind of think that, like, I think there are 5 teams that have kind of, like, I don't want to say completely separated themselves, but like, I think Marquette, Purdue, UConn, Arizona, and Kansas. Mm-hmm. That would be my, like,
you don't throw Houston in there?
I just don't know if Houston's played a tough enough schedule at this point. They would be the one. I mean, if you're looking at I wrote down some teams before we got started. At 6, I put Houston. I mean, they're right there.
Right.
And
those other teams have all kind of played each other, though, a little bit.
Yeah. I just like Houston passes my eye test.
Yeah.
But I do like who have you played? Who have you beaten? Like, you look at who Purdue has played. Mm-hmm. Like, come on now. I mean, Purdue has taken on everybody, right? Bama, Arizona, Marquette. Like, they have played Everybody.
Yeah,
Houston
Invitational helped a lot of those teams.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Houston's toughest game at this point. I mean, they played at Xavier, played a solid Dayton team. They did play A&M this past week. That's a good win for them. But no, I think Purdue has the most unstoppable force.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that one thing that beyond you take every other team's like thing, you know, that thing that you have to game plan for, deal with, and even if you have a good plan for it, it might not matter.
Mm-hmm.
That Purdue's got that. There's something with this Marquette team that I just love. That I feel like when they're at their apex, I'm not so sure they're not the best team in the country. But what's weird for me, what'll be interesting is like, can you win a national title without a legit no-brainer first-round draft pick on your roster? Who do you guys think Marquette has a legit first-round star?
No.
I don't know if they do. And I know that's maybe giving some weird preface to how you would look at a national championship team, but I mean, just go down the line, like look at every past national champion. They got like first round dudes on them. So on the team.
I've actually done this, Nick. There is not, because I'm a dork. There's, I think every single team going back to like when they expanded the tournament in 85 has at least 2 NBA guys, and almost all of them have 3 with 1 that is a first rounder. So that your objection to Marquette is totally fair. Historically, it does not happen very often. It's
very rare, and that's one of the hesitations with them. But yeah, I've loved what I've seen from UConn too. Mm-hmm. I mean, they look like, you know, some teams win, and you see this at any level where it's an NFL, NBA, whatever, and they win, and it like they have a successful season, and they either they take their foot off their gas with the process, or they think like, you know, because of what I did last year, everybody should lay down and just kind of get out of our way. Mm-hmm. UConn looks like they have taken everything they've done from last year and just like it's just been rocket fuel for them. Like their confidence. I didn't even think Danny Hurley, he still is going crazy on the sidelines, but I think even Danny's got like a different look about him of like, you know, I know what we're capable of. Yeah. So I love what I've seen from them too. I feel like Purdue, UConn, and Marquette strike me as the 3 teams that I believe in the most at this point.
That's Nick Bahe. He's a FS1 college basketball analyst, hosts the Nick Bahe Show, Nick Bahe podcast, and the Chick and Nick Show here on Hurrdat. Nick, we appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Nick.
That's Nick Bahe. We will continue with Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
For some reason, I'm in a much better mood now.
That's because we just talked to Nick Bahe. You'd also be in a better mood if you went out and saw our friends at Pratt Dental in North Platte, Nebraska, because Pratt Dental was the first dentist in Nebraska certified in the BioClear method. You're like, well, Ravi, what's the BioClear method? It is a treatment that is. I lost the word there for a second.
Hey, what's the BioClear method?
Terrific question. No, it is a treatment that can help correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive fashion than treatments such as crowns. It's less time, less waiting, less invasive, fewer appointments, and you can get multiple restorations done in the same day. Dr. Pratt Dental in North Platte, Nebraska. You can either give them a call, 308-221-2800, or to learn more about the BioClear method and remember words like treatment that I apparently forgot, you can go to prattdental.com/BioClear-dental-treatment. That's prattdental2ts.com. Go to services, click on the BioClear treatment to learn more.
That's funny, man. You're a funny guy.
Funny how? I amuse you like a clown? We appreciate Nick Bahe joining us. Really good stuff there from Nick, college basketball stuff. Obviously, he's a big Husker fan, comes from a Husker family as well. So really good stuff there from Nick. Appreciate him joining us. What's up?
So Nick brought up something in that last answer.
Okay.
When he was talking about the top 5 teams in college basketball.
Mhm.
And it was before he got on the topic of you have to have like a first-round pick or multiple NBA draft picks to really make a national championship run. He had mentioned the 5 teams.
Mhm.
And the 5 teams he said were Purdue, Kansas, Arizona, UConn, and Marquette.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a Pac-12 team, a Big 10 team, a Big 12 team, and 2 Big East teams.
Mhm.
My question to you is this. Would you rather be a team playing in the Big 12 this year or the Big East? Because you look at both conferences,
yeah.
and the Big 12 is loaded in the top 25, and I mean loaded.
Yep.
Then you look at the Big East, and the Big East is heavily loaded at the top.
Mhm.
And not to say that, the Big 12 isn't, because they have Houston up there. They have Oklahoma.
Kansas.
I think BYU is up there too. Yeah, but Kansas was kind of the known.
Yeah. Baylor's number 10. Texas is 19.
And Baylor was 1-6 before they lost to Michigan
Before
State.
they
So,
got
like,
weirdly boat
the
raced.
Big 12 is up there. But
Yeah.
based on what Nick just said in terms of, okay, these teams are probably national championship contenders right now, and 2 of them coming in the Big East, would you rather be a team in the Big East or the Big 12?
Yeah, so I mean, in the Big East, you've got UConn, Marquette, and Creighton at 5, 6, and 12. So the depth of really good teams in the Big 12 is probably a little bit deeper. Now, it's a bigger league, so that's part of it too. You've got 2, 3, 7, 10, 17, and 19.
But only one team that, Bahe considers a national championship contender.
Maybe
look at it as what league best sets you up for like a national tournament run.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a ton of difference. I think they're both really good leagues that you're going to have a really good – you're going to be really well prepared in the NCAA tournament because you're playing good teams night in, night out. It's probably – this year the Big East is probably a little bit easier than the Big 12. The bottom, there's probably some more wins to be found there. Although
but Butler's way up there this year.
Butler's better. I don't know if I buy it in terms of long term.
Yeah, it's probably a lot like we talked about with Houston. And maybe if you look at Oklahoma's schedule, who have you really played this year?
Like they played FAU pretty tight. But aside from that, their wins are not super impressive. They got boat raced by Michigan State by 20, which that's a fine team. But we've also seen Michigan State be up and down. So I don't know that I buy Butler. I'm still wait and see on like a Providence as well. So I think the depth of the Big 12 is probably a little bit more daunting this year. I think unless Villanova can come up the way we thought they might be at the start of the year, Villanova's kind of the tipping point for me for the leagues. If Villanova continues to struggle is probably too strong of a word. But they lost to Penn earlier this year. They lost to St. Joseph's. They lost to Drexel. They lost to Kansas State. Like they had kind of a rough stretch here prior to beating UCLA. That to me is, if Villanova's good the way we thought they could be at the start of the year, that probably tips it to the Big East for me, since they are down so far this year. So far as in up to this point, not so far down. I think it probably tips Big 12 at this point.
I probably tend to agree, just because of where you kind of see the numbers in the top 25. The easy answer is the Big 12, but I think I'd also rather play national championship competition.
Sure, yeah.
On the regular, which is why I'd say if I'm Creighton, I like being in the Big East, versus if I'm Creighton, I want to be in the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, can the Big 12 spit out 7 or 8 NCAA tournament teams?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Will the Big East spit out all 8 tournament teams? Probably not.
No, I'm guessing you're looking at
4,
5. It's probably,
I
guess a 5 bid league.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, it's just a matter of what league you think sets you up best for your run. And, a lot of it too, Ravi, is what your seed is.
Yeah.
right? Because last year, Creighton was a 6?
Yeah, because of their struggles in that stretch
Yeah.
between the end of the non-con and the beginning of the conference play.
Yeah, during when a lot of players were sick, like Kalkbrenner was out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it knocked down their ceiling as a seed. And, had they been a 3, maybe it's a little bit easier. But
I don't know, though, because what I think about is because they were a 6 and because they fell in their certain region, that side of the bracket, it actually helped. Like if you look at how teams were beat, it helped Creighton get to the Elite Eight.
Playing the 15 in Princeton to go to the Sweet 16. It worked out for them matchup wise. So yeah, I mean, it does. A lot of that matters in terms of how you end up being in March.
But you're right. If you're a 3 seed versus a 6 seed,
generally,
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Generally, it's a lot easier to move forward.
Yeah, your path is going to be easier. So because you can't count on the Princetons of the world or the Farley Dickinsons of the world.
I don't know. Nowadays you can, though.
Almost, yeah.
Right? There's going to be a team this year, again, whether they're a 15 or a 16, and maybe not a 16 because those are very rare.
No, but you're probably going to have a 14 seed or higher win some games.
They'll win their first round game.
Like
at least,
that's kind of how
the team just gets hot. They're I don't know, connecting on all cylinders.
Yeah.
It was St. Peter's 2 years ago. It was Princeton last year. It was Fairleigh Dickinson last year. I mean, no one knew who FDU was. No one expected Purdue to lose, which, what happened when Virginia lost to a 16? The next year, did they win the title?
They did. They won the title.
So does that mean Purdue's winning the title this year?
That's the only history we have to go on so far. No, you make a good point, though, is the unexpected and the seeding is a lot more of a crapshoot than it used to be, even though it's always kind of been known for upsets, right? Want to kind of start switching gears back here to kind of the college football realm and the Dylan Raiola stuff a little bit. I know we got a lot of stuff in the chat as we were talking about Dylan Raiola about Casey Thompson, right? And, there's this narrative out here that we didn't really get to about Casey Thompson and how things played out last year, right? Because there were some people that were surprised as we're talking about his potential return to Nebraska that he would even be interested, considering the way people thought Coach Rule ran him off last year. And I wanted to kind of clear that up. That is not what happened. Casey Thompson did not get run off by Nebraska last year. Casey Thompson and Matt Rule, to my knowledge, and I feel pretty good about this, had a very honest conversation about what Nebraska wanted out of their quarterback room and what Casey Thompson wanted out of what he thought was going to be the last year of his college football career. Casey, very understandably, wanted a place that he would feel really good about getting a lot of playing time. Nebraska, with Casey having to miss all of the spring with an injury, was not going to be able to compete for the job in the spring, was like, hey, I can't guarantee you by the end of the spring that the job won't be wrapped up, which is a very honest thing to tell a guy and probably worked against Nebraska, if we're being real here. Like if they had said, hey, yeah, in the fall, you'll have every opportunity to compete for the starting job, then maybe Casey Thompson's your backup last year instead of Heinrich Harburg, and you make it to a bowl game, right? That would have been better for Nebraska. Instead, they told him the truth. He went to FAU. Obviously, he got hurt. Didn't work out for him there. But because they were honest and upfront with him, that relationship, we talked about relationships, that's why the door was still open for Dylan Raiola. It's the same reason the door is still open for Casey Thompson to return, because Matt Rule, how many times has he told you this? Cares more about what's doing right for the players than about what's doing right for himself. Right for himself would have been to keep Casey Thompson last year, keep him on a string. So if what happened last year happens, you've got a good backup. That's not what happened, and now Casey Thompson likely headed back. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, the H&H Chevrolet stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me as well.
What's up?
We are continuing to talk Nebraska football, but you know, you can't talk about sports in Nebraska without talking about our friends at Warhorse Sportsbook. They are the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. You can either do it at the casino in Lincoln or here in Omaha at Horseman's Park, 6303 Q Street. You can bet on nearly every major sporting event with straight bets, parlays, props, live in-game bets, which are all accepted at the Warhorse Sportsbook. You can create your bets on the Bet Builder portion of the app and then go to the kiosks either in Lincoln or in Omaha and place your wagers in person. Visit warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook or get the Warhorse Casino app for details and a full list of house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Wanted to touch on a little bit more of that Casey Thompson stuff because we had a comment earlier in the YouTube stream about how they didn't want Casey Thompson to be kind of the de facto quarterback coach because he had kind of a average to mediocre career as a player. And first of all, I think Casey Thompson could be an excellent mentor in that room. I don't disagree that they still need a real quarterback coach, which we can get to. But you took a little exception to part of that comment.
Yeah, so the comment was, let's get a real quarterback coach, not some former player who didn't really do much in his college career. And my instant reaction to that was, how many coaches out there didn't do much in their college careers? Like the best coaches are the ones that didn't have elite careers. Actually, I would just say that because the majority of coaches are the ones that didn't have elite careers. Because why? Well, their time in the league or in college was short-lived, and they were shifted to do something different. Let's take Garrett McGuire, for example.
Sure.
I'm not saying he's the best wide receiver coach out there, but when he was playing for Coach Rule at Baylor, he actually wasn't playing.
Yeah, he didn't play.
He was on the bench, and then he got shifted into this so-called role of coaching wide receivers, mentoring young wide receivers, and boom, now he's a wide receivers coach in college football, and he's being talked about as one of the best young coaches in the college football game, not only because he is, 22 years old.
23, I think, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
something like that.
He's about the age of all my coworkers at Hurrdat, but
yeah, pretty close. The average age of Hurrdat, 23 years old. And
maybe we should hire Garrett McGuire. Let's see what he's doing. Is he busy?
You know what? He's doing something, and he's doing something well. But he's also been successful on the recruiting trail. And not only in state.
And he's already coached in the NFL. I mean, he was an assistant with Rule at the Panthers.
But the majority of guys aren't the best on their team. Tom Brady could coach someday. Yes. But is he going to be one of the greatest coaches out there? I don't know. Matt Rule's another great example. At Penn State, he was a linebacker.
Yeah, walk-on linebacker. He's a nothing player.
Walk-on. That was the key term there, is walk-on. Now he is looked at as one of the top coaches in college football. Like, there are so many examples out there where you don't have to be the ultimate player to be the ultimate coach. And in a lot of ways, you become the ultimate coach by sitting on the sidelines and sitting in the film room and studying the game differently, because you're trying to impact and elevate your number one job in the room.
Well, and the other thing that you run into with super successful players versus kind of these mediocre players when they're trying to get into coaching is the super successful players usually have a level of physical ability that makes the game a little bit easier for them, right? Not that it's easy, not that they don't work hard, not that they don't do all the other things that these other players do, but when you have a certain level of physical ability, the game comes a little bit easier to you. And so when you've got these really, really high-level players, it can sometimes be really challenging to be a good coach because you don't understand what less talented guys go through and what they need to be able to succeed, right? Like, I mean, you're listing off guys that were like nothing player. Like Nick Saban was a defensive back at Kent State. Okay, cool. Kent State in the 70s, who cares, right? That's not a special player. Nick Saban, best college football coach of all time. I mean, you can go down the list. Kirby Smart, Urban Meyer before he retired, whatever he's doing right now. Like all of the great coaches in college football, pretty mediocre in terms of their playing career. And I do think part of it is because when you're not a super talented player, to even get to that level, you have to have everything else on point. You have to have everything else, the mental part of the game, the preparation part of the game. You're basically coaching yourself just to get to that point. And then it becomes easier to coach other players as well. So I agree with you that you don't have to be a great player to be a great coach. In fact, I think it often works the opposite. The other thing is, I do think they're bringing in a real quarterback coach also, right? Like I fully believe, and the name that I've heard is Glenn Thomas. I fully believe Glenn Thomas is going to be brought in to be the quarterback's coach and either the co-offensive coordinator with Satterfield, who will move back over to tight ends, or the pass game coordinator, which is essentially a co-offensive coordinator, okay? Glenn Thomas has worked with Coach Rule in the past. He was there at Temple with him as a quarterback's coach and as an offensive coordinator. He was with him at Baylor as a quarterback's coach and as an offensive coordinator. He stayed in college after Coach Rule went to the NFL. He's been an NFL quarterback's coach with the Falcons. He is an offensive assistant with the Steelers right now. Here's why this makes a lot of sense. Not just the history with Rule. What's going on with the Steelers offense right now? Matt Canada, offensive coordinator, already been fired, probably doing a total overhaul on that staff. Glenn Thomas has a history with Matt Rule. is obviously probably going in to be looking for a job this offseason. It was never the intention originally of the staff to have Marcus Satterfield coaching the quarterbacks. That was never the intention. It was supposed to be Jake Peetz. Satterfield was supposed to be coaching tight ends. And when Jake Peetz backed out of the quarterback job, they ended up going with Satterfield at quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. This is going to be a lot closer to the staff setup that Coach Rhule has had in the past. Last year was kind of a stopgap because he didn't want to make sort of a panic hire to fill a quarterback spot with guys that he either didn't know, didn't feel comfortable with, whatever. This, I'm pretty confident this is what's going to take place. It's going to be Glenn Thomas, Marcus Satterfield in very similar roles to what they've been under Coach Rhule in the past.
And I think it's important to have both Glenn Thomas or a quarterback's coach in the room along with Casey Thompson, but I still don't think it's necessary at the end of the day. Now, hear me when I say that, because Casey Thompson, I've seen him prepare. Like I've heard how he prepares. I guess I haven't physically seen him, but I've seen things before, and I've heard from members of the coaching staff on how Casey Thompson prepares, to have enough faith to know that he can be a really good quarterbacks coach someday. But the reason why I think it's important to have a quarterbacks coach in the room is because you have a guy like DR entering. I still don't think it's necessary, but I think it's important. Now, there is a differentiation between those two terms for me, and some may look at that as, no, I think it's pretty necessary because you have such a young kid coming in. But knowing the talent he already has, I don't know how much a quarterback's coach will end up doing for his development that members of this coaching staff can't do for his development right now. So by just bringing in that veteran presence into the room, I think that really helps bridge the gap in terms of what you're looking for out of a true quarterback's coach and what Casey Thompson can offer as a quarterback mind.
Yeah, so I think the difference for me here is I agree Casey probably has the ability in the long run to be that type of guy. When you're bringing in a guy like Dylan Raiola, though, you want somebody that's done it before. That, to me, is why you need Glenn Thomas still, is because you really can't roll the dice on a guy who hasn't done it before yet in Casey Thompson. I think having Casey Thompson in the room is a terrific idea. I think having a quarterback coach who has done it before, who has helped mentor a Charlie Brewer and a Washington from Temple into a NFL player is really, really important, because there's a track record of having done it. He's done it at the NFL level. He's done it at the college level. Whereas Casey Thompson would be more of like a Garrett McGuire type. You could take a chance on Garrett McGuire because you have confidence in his ability, and you don't have anybody in that room that's like, hey, you cannot mess this up. You have a lot of guys that you're like, hey, I think they're going to identify with Garrett McGuire. I think they're going to like this guy. I think he's a good coach. With Dylan Raiola, they have to get it right.
Yeah, and you mentioned that saying in the room, and I think that's important because you can look at that from the quarterback's coach point of view, but I think that's really why Casey Thompson in the room is important, to be that acting figure. But Dylan Raiola's contact list is so large in terms of who he can touch base with and be kind of a so-called out-of-room quarterbacks coach for him. I mean, Mitch Sherman wrote a great article on how Dan Orlovsky pretty much molded Dylan Raiola and has really been a great mentor for him. He'll still have those connections outside of the room.
He's got the quarterback coach that coaches Mahomes as well. Christensen, I think his name is.
Right. So because he has all those connections outside, that's why I don't think it's necessary inside of the room, because you already have, and I'm assuming Casey Thompson's going to be there. And when I say already have him in the room.
So here's the big difference for me is, and then we're going to get to Mike Schaefer here coming up at the top of the hour. The big difference for me is all those guys are more quarterback skill coaches. Glenn Thomas can help mold those skills into the offense as well. It's a more direct coaching of what needs to happen in the offense, not just what can make you a better quarterback overall. That, to me, is where Glenn Thomas would bridge the gap as a quarterback coach in the room, if that makes sense. Coming up, we've got Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Wonder if he's been busy this week. And let's see if we've got any other surprises coming Nebraska's way tomorrow. All that and more coming up on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. And for hour number 3, we're on KFOR in Lincoln as well. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. Mike Schaefer will be joining us in just a moment. But before he does that, I want to tell you about our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's has 4 great Omaha area locations. They've been family owned and operated in Omaha for over 25 years, and they've been voted first place best of Omaha for 18 years running. They invest in the latest technology, so they're always up to date. They can work on any make and model from Fords to Teslas, and they care about the community that they live and work in. So for every car repaired, they give back through their Give Back program. Go check out dingmans.com for more information about their services and about their Give Back program. That is Dingman's Collision Center. We still working on Schaefer there, Shane?
Still waiting.
All right. Come on, Schaefer. No, we...
What could you possibly be doing?
Yeah,
I'm sure he's got things to do.
I don't think he's that busy. No, we've...
well, we can ask him. He's here.
There we
See,
go.
I told you.
Any minute now. It's all right. We've got our guy, Mike J. Schaefer, on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Schaefer, what's going on, buddy?
Sorry, internet connection issues, but we're good to go. Nothing can slow me down, you know.
No hat today for Schaefer.
Yeah, there's a couple sitting over here, but I didn't want to put a Vikings hat on after that performance on Saturday. And, you know, I just decided people can see my receding hairline and widow's peak in all its glory.
That's all right. Everybody's focused. Great. Everybody's focused on the beard. Nobody cares about that. Schaefer, obviously it's been a busy time of year for you. Obviously, we're going to talk about Dylan Raiola, but before we get there, how much more, I guess, how many more surprises are you expecting between now and tomorrow morning? Any?
Surprises? No. I mean,
remember, surprises to you and surprises to everybody else might be different.
Sure. Yeah, I'll run through. I think Nebraska is in a pretty good spot here with Vincent Shavers, who was just here over the weekend, Bly Hill, who was just here over the weekend. And then the two that people might not know about as much, there's a pair of defensive backs in Miami that are making decisions tomorrow in Larry Tarver and Amari Sanders. Nebraska had each on campus at some point here throughout the year. Amari Sanders was in June, and he's someone, his older brother, Tony Sanders, plays basketball at Notre Dame. He is a developmental defensive back, big, long, a guy that I don't know if he's a corner or a safety exactly, but there's someone that they clearly like a lot. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Larry Tarver is a slot corner, or at least that's how 24/7 Sports views him, an interior guy in your defensive backfield. And that's, always kind of unusual if you can find someone who can play that position right away. Like, that's the nickelback role is pretty tough. Dime is pretty tough if you're in it. And I think finding someone who might be ideal there is good for Nebraska as well. So Larry Tarver is committed to Maryland, but he told me after his Nebraska visit that he was going to just go to signing day and just decide if he was going to stick with the Terps or if he was going to pick Nebraska. So, that was what, October 29th or whatever. So good on him. He stuck to his word on that one.
Schaefer, let's talk about DR now, officially getting that commitment last night. It was something that was becoming more of an expectation as the days went on. You had a crystal ball in, I believe.
Those don't mean anything.
No, you had the crystal ball in last February.
Yeah.
So you were ready to go. But other people too, Will Fong, BC, I think had one, Brunty, it was becoming an expectation, a reality. And then it hit. So you see this commitment. Is it enough for you to say that no doubt this team is making a bowl game next year, winning 6-7 games?
Oh man, there's no way that I would just say there's no doubt. And especially when we're talking about a freshman quarterback. I mean, if you want my no doubt answer, it's that I have no doubt that assuming Dylan Raiola takes the first snap for Nebraska in 2024. I have little question about who's going to be the starting quarterback, assuming he's healthy. He didn't come here to sit on the bench. He didn't come here to watch someone else have the role. And Nebraska's room, even with Chubba, even with Heinrich, it'd be really hard for me to imagine that, it's not going to be Dylan. Maybe they bring in a transfer quarterback and that could change my opinion on it. But right now, it's hard to imagine that it's anybody but Dylan Raiola to start. And so because of that, it'd be difficult to just say that there aren't potential for growing pains, that, Nebraska's roster isn't so well built that a guy who's never played a snap before in college football can just step right in and not, have growing pains or not have problems. So I mean, the schedule sets up nicely. I felt like if they got a veteran quarterback that could, move the offense through the air a little bit, manage the pocket, manage the locker room, the schedule sets up nicely for them to win a bunch of games early and get better as the year goes along. And that's still true. But now you maybe have a little bit of a leeway if you struggle early. Some of these teams, this is when you'd rather catch them, or, they're maybe not the best teams on your schedule. So that might help out Nebraska in the end. But yeah, I would really, really be pushing it if I was like, yeah, I'm guaranteeing a bowl right now.
All right.
I know the last 7 years.
Schaefer, I know that one of the biggest things that people have started asking questions about with the commitment of Dylan Raiola is who is he throwing the ball to? Obviously, you have some of the freshmen.
Hopefully Nebraska.
Well, that's not as much of a given as we would like it to have been this past year. But in terms of guys on Nebraska's roster between this year's recruiting class and last year's recruiting class, how do you think that young wide receiver room is shaping up?
I think there's a lot of intoxicating, intriguing players. I also think Nebraska really needs to go get a veteran wide receiver to give another option. I mean, the loss of Kyle McCord is difficult. The loss of Julian Fleming isn't bigger to me, but it also is one of those things where there was no clear pivot. When you could pivot from Kyle McCord to Dylan, like you're like, okay, long term you're getting a 5-star quarterback versus 1 year of this guy. Like that's not a really super tough equation right now in college football. But not having a good offense built around him gives me apprehension. I don't trust the running game at all. And then the wide receivers, I really like Jalen Lloyd. I really like Malachi Coleman. I think Jaden Doss can be really interesting. It's just hard for me because we haven't seen these guys emerge. And really, other than say 2014, 2015, when guys like Brandon Riley and Jordan Westerkamp and a handful of others, just Alonzo Moore was part of that. Like they had a bunch of receivers in that run that just kind of all sort of peaked at the same time. They're probably gonna need that here in 2024. Like you're gonna need Demetrius Bell to be a guy that can get you some yards, even though he's never played before. You're gonna need Jaden Doss to help out from the slot, and you're gonna need Jalen Lloyd to be more than just a big play specialist. So it's and of course Malachi's in there too. So I would love to see Nebraska add a veteran wide receiver. I think they will. The quality of which remains to be in question to me, because it's not like there's this loaded crop of receivers sitting in the portal. I mean, they're kind of sifting through and figuring out body types or style, or do they have a connection here, that kind of thing. And that's why Julian Fleming, to me, is a bit of a loss.
So, Schaefer, you mentioned what you would like to see. My question, because I think there's 3 different possibilities here. What do you ultimately think Dylan Raiola's commitment, trickle-down effect is? Is it more 5-star recruits will now come in to play with him? Is it you get that top portal target because they're itching to play at Nebraska now with a guy like Raiola in the room? Or is it, as you kind of alluded to, the impact on the current guys in-house, because now it could be exponentially higher for them in terms of growth than it was 2 days ago?
Well, I mean, it starts in-house because those guys are already there, and the benefit that they're going to get for having a quarterback that you perceive to be more accurate and a little more on schedule than what they had this year would be pretty high. The benefit in terms of recruiting, I think, is probably going to come more from 2025 recruits than it is from transfer portal guys in general, because just like with Julian Fleming, and I've had people ask, well, why can't Nebraska be in that? You have a 5-star quarterback, and it's like, well, he's got 1 year to play. He's not going to bet his 1 year on a guy who's never played college football before. So I think that, who you get in the portal is going to be somewhat capped by the idea of if they only have a year, are they going to put that trust in someone who's never played? I mean, Nebraska's quarterback picture isn't exactly intoxicating for transfer portal wide receivers. But if you're a 2025, if you're a high level 25 receiver and Nebraska comes to you and they're like, we have the number one quarterback in the country in 2024. He's just going to be a sophomore by the time you get on campus. That's a guy that can help get you better day one. Think of how many reps and how much he's going to go through in the 24 season, and he's going to be ready by the time you get to campus, and then you can be ready right away as a freshman. Like the way that you can make that pitch to these 25 receivers is really, really strong. And then, I mean, Dylan Raiola was just all over the pure recruiting scene. I mean, he's just a known name. I mean, Brunt's talked with Preston Taumua, and this shouldn't be a shock. He's from Hawaii, but even he was talking about, oh yeah, I've been friends with Dylan for so long and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I mean, the guy is just connected in part because he played for all these different high schools and does all these different events and everything else. But I think he's going to help in 25 for sure.
We're talking with Mike Schaefer of Husker 24/7. You mentioned some of the guys that are already in the room, like a Demetrius Bell, a Jalen Lloyd, a Jaden Doss. Are there any guys that didn't really play this year? I'm looking like a Bryce Turner, Jeremiah Charles, that you're excited about at all in terms of their potential development into impact wide receivers?
Well, I think both of those guys, I know Bryce Turner for sure is a defensive back now, and I think Jeremiah Charles got moved there as well. So I think Nebraska looked at their wide receivers. They brought in all those development guys, and they moved the ones up that they felt like needed to be moved up. Well, Jalen Lloyd, wasn't necessarily a slam dunk to stay at wide receiver, but he clearly was their pick over Bryce Turner and Jeremiah Charles. Those guys are moving to defensive back, where Nebraska looks like they're going to take 37 in their class of 67 people that they're going to sign. And so I don't know what Evan Cooper is doing. He's just collecting all the pieces. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work exactly with your roster numbers, but I don't think there's another wide receiver that, I'm trying to think if there's even a walk-on guy that could potentially pop. But no, I think, and even with your class that you have coming in, you have Davon Hall, you have Isaiah McMorris. I mean, for me, it's probably Ja'Cory Barney. If we're talking about a receiver that I'm excited to see for next year that hasn't done anything yet. I love the idea that he's an early enrollee. I love the idea that he and Dylan Raiola can kind of develop some chemistry in the spring. He's someone that I think is a real gadget player. I mean, the comparison that everybody wants to make to him because he can do a bunch of different things is a Deebo Samuel, but he also needs to get a lot bigger to be a Deebo Samuel. So I'm really excited about the potential of a Ja'Cory Barney. And then, I mean, Keelan Smith had a monster year. He's someone that's really interesting to me. Quinn Clark is one of those guys that I think, we're going to do the Super Six earlier this year. I'll get you guys your ballots for that here after signing day. But, Quinn Clark's one of those guys that I'm going to be hard pressed to move out of my either sleeper spot or I'm going to want to work him in. I mean, I like a lot of that. I don't know if he's going to stay at receiver or not, but those guys are really interesting. The two Bell West guys are interesting too, but I think because I haven't seen the other ones as much, I gravitate more to the out-of-state guys. So no apologies to them. Or, excuse me, apologies to them. Not no apologies.
Shafe, we spent some time this morning talking about Casey Thompson and his potential.
Good, we're talking about Casey? What's going on?
How incredible. And, it's funny because we kind of took it the direction of quarterback coach because Ravi is on the side of, even though Casey's in the room, he still thinks it's important to add a quarterback's coach to this team. I took it the other direction and thought, well, Casey Thompson is kind of an acting coach in himself, and I don't know how necessary it is to have a quarterback coach if Casey Thompson is in the room to be that veteran presence for mentoring and molding Dylan Raiola. What do you think, Shafe? Do you think it's important and or necessary to have a quarterback's coach too, even if Casey Thompson is in the room, or are you feeling the latter like me?
I definitely think you want to, if you can work it with your position where it's currently available, you can move Marcus Satterfield to tight end and you can bring in an experienced quarterback coach. I think that's a good idea. For me personally, I mean, I know everything out there with Casey. I know he's been in Lincoln recently. I'm pretty sure he's in Lincoln right now. But I don't know that I can just rely on the fact that a soon-to-be 26-year-old can be the quarterback coach of your position room that he's also in. It seems like this is trending to him being back with Nebraska. It's sort of a fascinating turn of events from where things were at last spring, where, people felt like Matt Rule ran him out of town, which was never really the case. But that narrative took on some run in early September when Jeff Sims was struggling. But I think that Casey could be helpful in sort of a quarterback emeritus role, I guess, if you will, like just a guy who can provide some feedback, a sounding board, someone who can kind of express what they're seeing to a guy like Dylan or to some of these other quarterbacks. But if, like I look at it like this, if Casey Thompson is here and Nebraska retains Heinrich Harburg or Chubba Purdy, I don't know that you can go from competing with the guy or looking at him as a teammate to then suddenly you're going to like view him as kind of this quarterback savant. To me, it'd be more for guys like Daniel Kalen and for Dylan Raiola to sort of soak up the knowledge of someone who was at Texas and then Nebraska and Florida Atlantic. I mean, he been in football for a long time. He can talk about it. There's no doubt about it.
Schaefer, I'm curious as I'm kind of looking at this class. I'm looking at some of the other names. Obviously, Dylan Raiola is the headliner, his name's in lights on the marquee. And there's some other higher profile guys. We've talked about Grant Bricks. We've talked about Carter Nelson. Without, I know you like to do the Super Six and stuff, but who else in this class kind of gets you excited about their future at Nebraska?
Yeah. I mentioned Ja'Cory Barney, so I won't have to go back to that one, but he's someone I like quite a bit, and he'd be pretty high in my Super Six. I'll give you a name that is right here local that, quite frankly, I didn't know enough about. He got his offer. I watched him in 7-on-7 stuff, and I was like, okay, I see the athleticism. And then I went and watched him play this year, and then I talked to some different coaches on him. Donovan Jones had a hell of a year. I mean, he was really, really good for Omaha North. He is a physical defender. I think he is going to slide into that rover role that Isaac Gifford currently occupies, where you can kind of play between being a linebacker and a safety. I think he has that sort of athleticism in his game. There was an element of watching him play where I'm like, Nebraska is getting two of the same player in Caleb Benning and Donovan Jones. Like they're both pretty instinctive. They're both more than willing to come up and stick their nose into a run play and hit a running back. They like to kind of bait the quarterback a little bit with some of the off coverage to see if the quarterback thinks he can put it into a window. And they're just sort of playmakers. And so I really like, you can include Caleb in this too. I like what they're getting there in that secondary. I think those guys are really, really interesting players. And then, as I said, I joked they're taking 37 defensive backs. Well, here's another. And he got hurt. But Rex Guthrie had some awesome highlights as a junior. He's a really good athlete. Same thing, another safety, another guy that might be able to play some different roles, as well. So those are some of the ones that jump out. On the offensive line, I think that Gibson Pyle is maybe a little bit forgotten about because he committed so early. I think he's really intriguing. And then a guy like Ian Flint, who we don't talk about a lot too, he's like the third commitment. What intrigues me about Ian Flint is he's really good at blocking. And so it's like, do you have like an NFL mentality where you have this like backup tight end or third string tight end, but you use him a lot because he's a really good blocker, so he's in on specific packages for that kind of thing? Or with his size, does he grow into being a potential offensive lineman? So I think that Ian Flint is one of those kind of tweeners that could be between either being an offensive lineman in the future or staying at tight end and being a really predominant blocking tight end. But he's one of those guys that's never going to put up big numbers, but could be pretty valuable as you start to put together the blueprint of what you want this to look like.
So, Schaefer, we've experienced one offseason already with this staff. They're obviously making major strides with the addition of Raiola. But what are some other things they need to recreate that you considered wins a year ago? And what are some things they missed the mark on that should be highlighted in offseason number 2?
Yeah, it's difficult because to me, the issues that I'm concerned about are largely going to be in-season stuff. It's going to be in-game management. It's going to be clock management. It's going to be having a better feel for when you want to push with your offense versus when you just take the fact that you are 45 yards, or excuse me, you're at the 15-yard line and you got to go a long way to kick a field goal and you got 45 seconds left. So I'm curious more about that than I am the off-season stuff. I think I think Matt Rule is going to always do well with the offseason stuff. I think he is. I think he's truly a culture building kind of guy. I think the culture in that locker room and that program is so much better now than it was at this time last year when they first got here. And I think that's going to really help him out. But in terms of things that, I would like to see, I would like to still see a running back out of the portal. I'd like to see a commitment to the running game. But I think you also have to have the right piece for that too. And I don't look at their running back room and I'm not wowed by it. I'm not, particularly, if they don't bring in competition, I'm not particularly excited about another year of Gabe Ervin and Emmett Johnson and Ramir Johnson. And they're all good individual pieces, right? But I'm at the point where, like, I need to see Nebraska get a difference-making running back instead of just another guy. And it feels like they haven't had a difference-making running back in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably Amir Abdullah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're talking, like, legitimately good, if you're talking about pretty good, then it's like, what, Mills and Ozigbo? I mean, basically.
Ozigbo had a nice year. Yeah.
But even then, I don't – like, those guys are really solid. But, man, part of it is just growing up when I did, and just Nebraska always had fantastic running backs. And then the other part of me is like, you haven't made a bowl game in 7 years. Your team's really struggled. What haven't you had in 7 years? You tried a lot with quarterbacks. You tried a lot with these other things. Just haven't had a stud running back. Like that, I think would be very helpful for this program if they could get back to that again.
Yeah, and obviously part of that goes hand in hand with the quarterback struggles too, right? If you have a quarterback that's struggling, it's really easy to – because I don't know that there's nobody in that room that couldn't be Devine Ozigbo. I don't think there's a Amir Abdullah in the room.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
But
I think Ramir Johnson is still probably the most talented individual out of those three, but I just, 2 straight years of just no usage and health last year. I mean, it makes it hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That is Mike J. Schaefer. Did we miss anything before tomorrow that we should have talked about?
No, I think Bly Hill, I don't think I mentioned him. Transfer portal, defensive back, of course, from St. Francis, Pennsylvania.
Back. Let's do it.
Yeah, they want him to be opposite of Tommy Hill, and then it's just going to be, in the middle is going to be the Valley. That's what Nebraska's defense is going to be.
We appreciate it as always, Schaefer. I know you're going to be busy the next day or so maybe get some sleep, maybe get a nap in today before things get really crazy tomorrow. But we appreciate talking to you as always. We'll catch up with you again, I think, after the new year because we're off next week.
Happy holidays, gentlemen.
Thank you, Schaefer. That's our guy, Mike J. Schaefer on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Good stuff from him there. I think he's right. I think we're maybe waiting on a couple guys, the Tarver and Amari Sanders, like he was talking about. Otherwise, I think the class is more or less put to bed. But what a class it will end up being because you got your guy at the quarterback spot, Dylan Raiola.
Which only helps every other position group, especially at the skill position.
And like you said, next year, I think you're talking about an absolutely bonkers potential for the 2025
When you talk
class.
about like the running backs and how you can get to Amir Abdullah level, you kind of don't have to be when your passing game is projected to work.
Hurrdat Hot Seat coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. Also for this 9 o'clock hour, we're on KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. And it's time for the Hurrdat Hot Seat.
Yes, sir.
As we wrap up the show, been talking a ton of recruiting, caught up with some college basketball with our guy Nick Bahe, and just spoke with Mike J. Schaefer on that Warhorse Sportsbook hotline as well. All right, time for Hurrdat Hot Seat. Andrew, you want to go first? You have one you like?
I'll kick it off. On the heels of Raiola's commitment.
Okay, yeah.
If you could swap lives with a college athlete for a day,
ooh,
who would it be, and why would you choose that individual?
One college for just a day?
For just a day. Or maybe what would you do as that individual for a day too?
Interesting.
And it can be I'll allow it to be a recruit like Dylan, but don't choose Dylan.
Sure.
Like Dylan would be awesome to be for a day.
Yeah.
Especially in Nebraska.
Yeah.
I would want to like feel the fame. So I would walk the streets of Lincoln
so
that I could feel it. Well, maybe not in this weather, but I'd go somewhere where people can see me.
For sure.
But if there's another athlete, who would it be?
That's a tough one. If you're going college athlete, I think you kind of do want the like big man on campus sort of feel.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go literally, that would be like Zach Edey because he's like 6'5", but literal big man on campus. But oh man, that's
Did
a
you
tough
say 6'5".
It's 7'5", whatever. He's enormous. He's like 18 feet tall. I don't know. 6'5" is taller than me still.
6'5" is 7'5" to you.
It's basically. The difference between me and 6'5" is like the difference between the rest of the basketball players and Zach Edey. Man, do you have one? I'm struggling.
I don't have somebody off the top of my head, but I was thinking of non-football sports.
Yeah.
Because I think it could be cool to be a baseball player on campus,
Sure.
or even like a college hockey player, as I'm thinking about Omaha a little bit.
Yeah.
My
brain kind
like
of
Caleb Williams would be an easy one.
Sure.
Because you're at USC, so everybody knows who you are.
Yeah.
You're a premier draft pick. You probably can just walk down the sidewalk and people are looking at you, but I don't know like his personality. So maybe people don't like Caleb Williams. But I'm just thinking about like Marvin Harrison could be a good one. Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh, that might be a good
one.
Yeah.
Michael Penix could be a good one on the football landscape.
And you asked, what would you do? I think the idea thing that you'd want to do is participate in like a midday game, like a 12 o'clock game or a 3 o'clock game. So you can have,
a basketball player.
So you can have the lead up to it, how you get to it, you play the game, and then you can have the afterwards, whatever that is that you prefer to go down.
You could even think like Bronny James for a day would be fun.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Have LeBron be your dad for a day. I kind of was thinking, this is weird. I was kind of thinking one of the, like a Jaden Daniels. And the thing I would do is I would do the Heisman Day. I feel like that would be fun to go through the process of the Heisman Trophy presentation as an athlete. That to me would be, I think, a pretty cool experience. You get to do, I like wearing suits and stuff too. So you get to like dress up and like pick your fancy suit out and whatever. And then just kind of go through the whole thing. That would be a super unique experience that obviously you're not going to get unless you're one of those guys. So I think I would go for this year, because you want to win, right? If you're
right.
So I think I'd go like Jaden Daniels and I'd do the Heisman experience.
So I'm also looking up right now those with the highest NILs.
Trying to cash a check.
Yeah, just get maybe there's a Venmo transfer to the Andrew Rogers of the world just because he's feeling nice.
Just
and
be like,
then,
you're
shoot. All of a sudden I have $500K in my account. This is weird.
Wild.
But no, I think Bronny James is a good one.
That's a really interesting one.
I think I'll land with him.
He'd have a really interesting day for sure. So here's mine. Would you rather be elite at like a obscure Olympic sport?
Okay.
So like
bobsledding,
curling, bobsledding, something like that, right? Where maybe once every 4 years you're on TV and stuff like that.
But no one's still watching your sport.
Yeah, like for the most part, you're in the back alley of the sports world, right? Or be like a super average guy on a major sport. So let's say, and let's take money out,
like
of
a
this.
Utility player.
Yeah, let's say you're a fourth outfielder for a baseball team, or you're a middle reliever.
Yeah.
Or let's say you're the ninth guy in the rotation on a basketball team, something like that. You're in the league. You're probably making like league minimum, but let's try and take money out of it. Because it's really easy to be like, well, I mean, if I'm in the NFL, I'm making more money.
Sure.
Let's try and take money out of it. Do you think it would be more fun to be elite at something random, or elite compared to the rest of the world, but average in your sport at a major sport?
I think I'd rather be average at a major sport.
Really?
Yeah. I've always had the dream.
And you're a baseball guy, so that's a big one.
And I've always had the dream of just walking on the field before a game and signing autographs, because no one really knows who you are anyway. Like they know, they see you wearing that team's jersey and they're like, I need to get
especially when you're a kid
signed. Right?
Like you're at spring training and they just want everybody to sign whatever.
Sure. Or even like, in a major league stadium before the game, you're warming up, you're playing catch. If you're a fourth outfielder, you're definitely on the roster, and you're making the playoff roster too. If you're the fourth outfielder, like that,
probably getting like, I don't know, 150, couple hundred plate appearances a year.
Yeah, like that to me would be incredible, a dream come true. Would it be awesome to be like really, really good at curling?
Yeah,
or like an awesome snowboarder. But how many people like are actually showing out to see
your
you representing that country.
So the recognition
okay, so here's a good example. So there was an Olympian in South Dakota. Gosh, his name is slipping my mind, but he's a high jump or a pole vaulter. People showed up to his parade. It was cool, but like the only people that like really cared were South Dakota fans. He won a silver medal. So like it's a huge deal.
Elite at what he does.
But there's like maybe 100 to 200 people there one time to see this guy. Whereas like if you're an average player in your sport, people are always coming to see your team and will always know your name. So I like that idea more than being an elite Olympian on the Norwegian bobsled team.
I think I want to be an elite Olympian. Like this is probably speaks to my psychology a little bit. I like being really good at stuff. Like I think I would enjoy that more.
I mean, you're still really good if you're
I get that. I get
a major
that, right?
professional sport.
But if you're, let's say you're one of the best 2 or 3 people in the world at your whatever the Olympic sport is, like that's pretty cool.
And TK brings it up on the Twitter stream, like being Shaun White would be pretty cool.
Shaun White's like more famous than I'm talking about though. Shaun White.
So too famous.
Yeah, Shaun White's like mainstream famous in sports at least.
Okay.
Like most,
but he's elite at his sport.
No, he is elite,
and he fits the criteria.
And it is kind of a random Olympic sport, so that would count. I mean, snowboarding, whatever. But
he's too popular for this example.
Yeah, like in my mind, I'm thinking more like
being a member of the Jamaican bobsled team from
like
Cool Runnings.
Jeremy Bloom was moguls. He skied moguls. He also was a punt returner for Colorado back in like the late 90s. But he was like a mogul skier. So I'm thinking something like that. Like you're elite at something that, like Shaun White, because of the X Games and stuff like that, got reasonably famous outside of kind of his niche sport. I'm thinking something a little bit more random at that. But that's that level of good, though. Like Shaun White level of competitive and elite. But I'm thinking a little bit less famous than Shaun White.
Okay, yeah.
Because Shaun White's an easy, I would love to be Shaun White. That'd be
because everybody knows Shaun White.
Yeah, everybody knows, like, he's got the money, he's got the endorsements,
he's good.
And he's elite at the thing. So I get that. I'm thinking, and I get these guys are super famous in other countries, but like a rugby player, right? Like a U.S. rugby player, not famous at all, right? But you're in the Olympics, you're probably competitive, although I know there's other countries that are better than the U.S., but something in that sort of realm. Everybody probably thinks you play football, so that's probably annoying just because they look at you and you're like, you play football? I was like, no, I'm a Olympic, rugby player or whatever. I think I gotta go. I think I gotta go elite random sport though.
Okay, now I want you to think about this going into the break.
All right.
We carry over Hurrdat Hot Seat.
That's right.
I just watched Miracle.
Okay, yeah. Terrific movie, yeah.
I actually watched it because I found out that that Avery was filling in for me on Monday.
Okay.
So I'm like, you know what? Sunday night after the football game, let's watch a little Miracle.
Yeah.
The question I want you to think about is this, and I'm going to give you some time to think about it.
Okay.
In a sports movie about your life, what would be the climactic, triumphant sports moment?
Ooh.
Okay, think about it as you go into the break.
That's a tough one. All right, coming up next, we will have more Hurrdat Hot Seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. We wrap up the show here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. Want to give you a little tease for tomorrow before we continue on Hurrdat Hot Seat. We have a great show for you tomorrow for signing day. We've got Caleb Benning joining us at 7:10 a.m. Carter Nelson will join us at 7:30. Guy named Steve Wiltfong.
Who's
Not
that?
sure if you're familiar with him. Just the recruiting goat over there at 24/7 Sports. He'll join us at 7:45. Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7 will join us at 8. Andy Kendi will join us at 8:30, and then our very own Anna Bellinghausen will join us at 9 to kind of put a bow on her time in Tampa with the volleyball Final Four, give a little preview of Craton and Villanova tomorrow night with Doug McDermott's jersey retirement. And, we're efforting some things, maybe try and get you a couple surprises tomorrow. I can't make any promises.
It'd be pretty cool.
I can't make any promises, but we are working on some stuff. But
We may have an all-guest show tomorrow.
that's already a great lineup for your Wednesday. A couple of high-profile recruits for Nebraska, a couple of high-profile recruiting guys, and, of course, Andy Kendi, our buddy at KETV, and our very
He'll
own.
be out at all of those signing day ceremonies.
Yeah, he's going to be a busy little bee over there. And then we've got Anna Bellinghausen, our very own, at 9 o'clock for the show there. So that's what's on tap for tomorrow. We might. I don't know if we can Matt Rule this and pull off a late inning surprise here for you, but we're doing our best. We'll see what we can do. But even if we don't, that's a great lineup we've got for you tomorrow. So make sure you check us out tomorrow for Nebraska signing day. Andrew, let's return to Hurrdat Hot Seat. Okay.
We'll revisit the question I went into the break with for you.
Reset that question.
Watched Miracle the other night.
Terrific movie. One of the best sports movies.
And so my question to you was, in a sports movie about your life,
mm-hmm.
what would be that climactic, triumphant sports moment? Like when the U.S. took down the Soviets, what is Ravi's climactic moment in his sports movie about his life?
Okay, so I have a question here.
Okay.
Is this a based on true events? Is this things that actually need to have happened? Like how
This is a true story.
Okay, so
about
that's
your life.
something that actually has happened. It's not like in the best case scenario of my life if things had gone
and you know what?
better.
Blow your story out of proportion like Hollywood for me.
Okay. So there's a couple things that come to mind here. Number one so there's a couple different ways this could go, right? Because I love Miracle. That's a great movie. Herb Brooks, kind of obviously the star of that movie. And I look back at my sort of athletic and sports career, whatever. And it's like, maybe I'm not Herb Brooks. Maybe I'm a supporting character in one of these movies. Maybe I'm a Craig Patrick. Maybe I'm
again.
Coach,
blow the whistle.
Like there would be an opportunity where with early in my coaching career, coaching college basketball, obviously at a small school level, but we won 3 straight regional titles at one point. Like that would be a really cool moment in my sports movie life, right? If I am the star of the movie, less impressive probably, but for me personally, the sort of athletic achievement that I'm most proud of in my life is benching 405 pounds. So that would be my probably climactic moment that you like work towards and get. And listen, it just happened in my basement. It wasn't in a competition or anything like that. It was just a thing that I had worked for 12, 15 years and finally achieved, right? So I don't know if it'd be a good sports movie, but if I'm a supporting character, it's probably the assistant coaching in basketball. If I'm the main character, it's probably benching. What about you?
See, for me, it's hard because I went to such a small school for high school that did not achieve anything crazy.
Sure.
In terms of like season awards, and in my senior year of, I guess I'll start junior year of high school, the soccer team, I was sweeper. We went to sectionals, but I was kind of the reason that the other team won. I got beat. I'm the last defender. I got beat. Tripped a dude in the box. He scores a PK.
Sure.
And they won 2-0. They ended up winning 2-0 in that game. But that game was so iconic, not only because we were in the sectionals, but a fight broke out on the field.
Okay.
And my left defender got taken down by his no-no square.
Uh-oh.
And he got on top of the kid that took him down. And this dude was a pest. This is the nicest way I can say it on the radio. This dude was a pest the entire game. And my guy gets on top of him and squares up 3 punches to his left cheek.
Oof.
Two. Dude, we're ripping bodies away from one another. Turns out the kid that got punched is the sheriff's son in the town that he grew up in, which is near Columbia. It may have been in Columbia, Missouri, which is where Mizzou is located. And, so he takes some punches. We lose that game. They try to later on come after this guy. They came after me at one point too, because a kid needed oral surgery because He took my elbow to the mouth.
Yeah.
And it was in action, so
Right.
it wasn't
Yeah.
a purposeful act. And they even went so deep to grab the high school footage, and like huddle footage where you have like the camera on the far corner and they zoom it in. It's all pixelated, and they're like, see, they slowed it down, and he purposely elbowed dude in the mouth. And I'm like, that was like a super iconic game for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking for like a win, because that wasn't a win, like you're gonna have to find me in the stupid sport category of like local washers tournament.
We doing like some cornhole.
Yeah, like where I won some pretty sweet coolers at this washers tournament. That's like how elite I get as from an athlete perspective. Like I've made diving catches and in baseball games, like I've hit big shots in basketball games. But like I haven't had elite performances.
Washers tournament.
I put up 25 points in a basketball game one time. That's probably the most elite I've got.
Sure. Yeah. So this one comes off of, this is a different question I was going to ask, but I kind of like the question. This comes off the YouTube stream from TD. He says, okay, we've got one scary player in Dylan Raiola. On offense, what other player is the most likely to earn Big Ten first teamer honors?
Okay.
I have an answer, and I think it's an okay answer, honestly.
Are you going skill position?
I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to tease too much. I can give my answer first.
Go ahead. You go first.
So I think the most likely guy is Bryce Benhart.
Okay.
I think he is.
I thought about the O-line for a hot sec.
I really think he's the most likely guy to, because I thought he should have gotten, not first team, but I thought he should have gotten all Big Ten honors this year, which I believe he did not even get honorable mention. TK says Justin Evans-Jenkins, also a possibility. That dude is got a nasty streak to him. But I think Bryce Benhart, because he already had a good year this year, a lot of times these awards are sort of like 2-year awards. You kind of, especially on the offensive line, where you don't have numbers to kind of point to and say, hey, this is, this quarterback is doing this or this wide receiver is doing this. I think Bryce Benhart, because of he was able to establish himself as a pretty high-level player this year, could, if Nebraska has a good year, I think he would be the most likely option to be a first-teamer in all Big Ten next year.
So I thought about the offensive line a little bit. And J.E.J. is a good pick.
Yeah, Justin Evans-Jenkins is a good pick from TK. I mean, is there a skill position player that you think of even?
No, like, and that's the hard part for me because I don't know. I think there could be a skill position that emerges because of
Dylan
Raiola, but like okay. So answer this for me.
Mm-hmm.
The O line's going to look like what?
Which guys?
J.J.
Yeah,
you'll
so
have Bryce Benhart.
So you'll have Teddy P.
Prohaska, yep, returning.
I believe Corcoran's gone. You know, Ben Scott.
Ben Scott's coming back.
And then I think Sam Sledge is going to replace Corcoran at the guard spot.
And Sam Sledge. I like the idea of Ben Scott.
Okay, that's possible. That's kind of the same idea as Benhart, like a really solid guy from last year that elevates himself.
Ben Scott would have stayed healthy.
Yeah, sure.
All season.
He could have had an opportunity.
He had a real chance to be labeled the best offensive lineman on this team.
Wild card idea here of another guy would be Thomas Fidone.
And yes,
that's projecting.
But
right?
I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know how Dylan spreads the football around.
Sure, absolutely.
Because until I give a skill, and that's what a prediction's all about, yes. But until I know if Dylan like latches on to a wide receiver or spreads it around a ton where everybody's getting their chance, or he's like, no, I like my tight end. A skill position is so difficult to say like yes to. Like remember at Purdue when Charlie Jones was just going off,
going crazy.
Well, Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones were
just had a connection.
And if there's a connection like that, if it's Dylan Raiola and Thomas Fidone, then yes, sure. But I think the same can go for Jalen Lloyd. I think the same can go for Malachi Coleman or Jaden Dawson, or really anybody. Whoever he gets the attention,
the chemistry with,
and he gets that chemistry, dude, it's game over.
I think just at tight end, it's a little easier to put up all Big Ten numbers because you're always going to have guys at wide receiver that put up crazy stupid numbers. So that's why I went tight end kind of over some of those other guys. That's the show for today. Tomorrow, great big signing day show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Make sure you tune in.